All right. Now we had a great discussion before we even started recording. So I'm really looking forward. There's been so much craziness with all of us being locked down for 2.5 months. And then just when we think we're through the tunnel, all of the police brutality narrative comes out and the protests are happening now and there's riots and there's looting. So it's a really wild situation right now. And what we're seeing a lot of is people with binary views on things. So one group has a very strong view of this is the problem. The other group has an opposing view. And there's a lot of talking at each other, but there's no real conversation going on. So you're in a unique position where you come from a police family. You understand the police department more than most of us do. Most of us have had a few interactions with the police, and then we make our judgment call based on that or what we're seeing in the media. So I really wanted to talk to you about your take on the pandemic, what role it's played in the rioting and the protests and the anger. There's a lot of anger out there right now.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, what's crazy is as you and I were talking earlier, there's this just perfect storm of situations that happened. The lockdown that we all thought was going to be about 2 weeks turned into months.
Right.
40 million people lose their jobs. No idea of whether those jobs are going to be there when everything reopens.
Right.
So you had that worry. You had people low on funds. And we had already had increases during that time. We had increases in domestic violence. We had increases in suicide. Not necessarily increases, but more suicides than normal. And what I mean by that is people that normally wouldn't be committing suicide were doing it. I guess that's the best way for me to put it.
Right.
Then you had all these unintended consequences from people being locked down. So you already had this cauldron that was there. And then, like you said, we finally get to the point to where they start phase one and they start reopening. And then the Minneapolis situation happens where they basically, they just murdered George Floyd. I mean, they came on, there's no other way of putting it, and anybody saw that. And to the testament of us being locked up and the overreaction, the only thing I can see is in the past, we've had these situations before. We've had situations where actually there was there would be two sides to the story. There would be, whether you agreed, it didn't matter, but there were two sides, meaning there's something, well, let's just wait, let's see what the prosecution says, that side of it. And then the other side says, oh, let's just fry him right now. He already, it's obvious this cop was a bad cop. This situation, 100% across the board, literally, except for maybe like this small margin of idiots that are there. Everybody agreed, man. I mean, everybody agreed. There wasn't one cop that I talked to that saw that just didn't shake their head and go, "Oh my God, we're so screwed." Yeah. They go, "We're going to pay for this. We are going to pay for it. It's not even my city. We're going to pay for this," And so then you saw this, but as you and I were talking, that the fact that we're in such, first of all, you had that happening. We were already in a polarized society politically. We've never been, in my memory of my lifetime, we've never been this polarized. And so you already had that us or them type of a thing going. And now this goes out, and the initial response was, I was actually really happy to see how quickly everybody condemned it. Like there really wasn't any waffling on any of it. So I was very glad about that. But then, I think people were so already pent up that they felt this was a really opportune time for them to not only finally get out of the house and let people know they're upset, but just everything came, like all the rage, all of it came there, and I think we hit the thing. And then I think we had people in the protest side of things where you had people taking advantage on that side. So you had people weaponizing protests and infiltrating the protests. I mean, the one thing we saw here in Vegas was, when they went to go to downtown Summerlin and places like that, they stopped a couple of cars full of weapons prior to it and stopped it out. They're deliberately there to do some damage. And you've seen that across the country. So there's that aspect of it. And then on the police brutality side of it, what's getting lost in it is, and I know people that if people have biases already towards the police, it's going to be hard for them to hear this, but believe it or not, I've trained probably at least 30 of the top cities in the U.S. for law enforcement. I've trained their various groups within those departments. Nobody wants bad cops on there. It makes their job so much harder. But as you and I were talking, nobody's talking nuance. They're like, defund the police, defund the police. Nobody's asking the question, how does a guy that gets 18 counts still stay on the police force? That's what that Darren, what's his name? I forgot his last name, but that idiot that had the knee on the neck. He had 18 counts against him, 18 different complaints against him. 2 were actionable on there. How is a guy like that still on the force? And I will tell you, the dirty little secret is there's a lot of protecting of bad cops from the police unions that come in. And oftentimes, or I can't tell you how many times a cop has been brought up on charges. They want to get rid of him. They want to fire him. And then the union comes around back door and they just get it exonerated. And they'll use some technicality to get the guy back on. And then literally they have to put him back on the street. Their hands are tied on this. Now, that's not an excuse. And I'm saying it's just a reality of the situation. He's like, how can this happen? Well, when you have these groups that are not looking at the greater good, they're looking at, how can I get the individual off? Kind of like a criminal, defendant, which is what you're dealing with. You can't afford to do it. I mean, you and I were joking about how amazingly on point, the Chris Rock piece right. is about. You can't. There are some groups that can't have bad apples, and absolutely right. agree. The cops are that, and we have to on that side of the house. People have to say something about these unions. They have to, and I'm not saying it's the only problem because there are departments that don't take action fast enough. I'll do that, but I will tell you that the police unions protecting cops that use excessive force on multiple times, it's super detrimental to everything.
And then also you can't marginalize these cops where you put them in administrative positions and take them off the streets either.
Well, that was it. So I had a situation that I'm very aware of where a guy who used excessive force and was known to be a jackass, and they had tried multiple times to get rid of him. When they finally thought they had him, the union got him out. The union representative got him out in a technicality, and he then the captain that was running that area said, I'm not putting this guy back out in the street. And they tried to, strap him with some administrative work. And guess what? He went up and he complained about that. And then they said, no, you can't do that. You can't restrict him. He was, quote unquote, exonerated. And this captain was forced to put him back out to the public on the streets. And, so far there have been no incidences, but everybody keeps an eye on this guy, just because of that. So there's incidences that it's not as cut and dry. If it truly was a binary issue, then all the cops wouldn't care, no matter, like all cops on their eye, all cops are good. And then on the other side, all cops are bad, and neither side's correct. There's more to it on each side, But the problem is now we're so wound up, the whole idea of defunding the police, that's taken some real issues, you wonder what the end game is with something like that, because, as I was talking to you, I mean, I've traveled, I've presented in over 52 countries. I worked a lot in South America. I worked in a lot of areas of the world where there was no cops to call. There was nothing there. And listen, you better have your own badass security setup. And I'll give everybody, I can say this without exposing the person. Right now, as you and I are sitting here, I know because I was supposed to film a product with him this week. I have a friend who's very big in the special security world, very well trained, very classic spec ops guy. He got called out to work with some bankers in the Minneapolis area. I'm laughing. It's not funny, but I'm laughing. He ends that up, gets everything going. Guess who contacted him so they could have their own personal security of essentially their own personal mercenaries?
Who's that?
The mayor and his staff.
Okay. Yeah.
The erroneous stuff. So it's okay for us to defund the police, take it out of the neighborhoods that need law enforcement, and we don't care why, because we've got our own.
Right.
But they're doing it right now. They have private security for themselves right now.
Right.
And that's what we're dealing with, and that's what happens each and every time. It's just
That's what happens. If we defund it to police, it's going to have a negative impact on some of the communities where there's protest, or where people are protesting racial profiling and so forth. Because in the wealthier communities, you'll just have hired guns. You'll just have your own security and so forth. But in devastated communities, or communities with way less income, they're not going to have that. So then it just becomes chaotic.
Yeah, and oftentimes they don't talk. The people that are yelling this, or I put one thing up. I try to stay out of the. I try to stay. Listen, I don't like the social media just flame throwing at everybody. It's useless. It's just basically mental masturbation.
100%.
But I put up one thing on, hey, is anybody else getting sick of all these media talking heads, celebs, and politicians, these hacks, telling us all that, hey, let's defund the police, let's do this, knowing full well they're protected in their communities or their own security teams. People with guns will be protecting them, and yet what they want is the most vulnerable parts of the cities are going to be left gone. And that's the other thing that happens when you have this effect where cops are targeted as potentially going into neighborhoods where they're not quote unquote welcome, meaning there are some agitators that come in and start protesting. What has been the policies in all these cities? They pulled the cops out of those areas, the areas where law enforcement is most needed. You talk to the people within those neighborhoods, and they're like, I have no stores to go to now. I have, my apartment building's been taken over. That's what happens when they abandon these areas. It's like everybody talks about Minneapolis abandoned Precinct 3 and let it burn. But what they're not talking about is that whole precinct now has no cops. Like it's done. It's like they have people coming in, and who does that affect? That affects that area right there. These people, and so these are not easy, quick answers. These aren't sound bites that we can do. And the problem is we're in this contentious political year, which, as I was telling you, I don't see any of this ending till after the election if we're lucky. And you're just going to continue to have this potentiality for violence. And I know in my business, the other thing that's crazy is how many people are asking to buy guns now. People are scared, and what's funny is it's kind of irrational the way they look at it. And what's I wouldn't say it's funny, but I got a ton of friends from California calling up trying to go, there's a 10-day wait. I go, well, yeah, there's going to be a 10-day wait no matter what in California. I said, you're not going to, well, can I come buy one from you? No, you can't come buy one from me. I can send one to you, but you'll still have to wait 10 days at a gun store to get it. And so that's where I think one of the things too is all of this, the civil unrest, the lockdown, the loss of, the economy taking the hit that it's had. I think people finally are looking at this going, oh my God, this all happened at the same time. Right. And, stuff that I'm sure people in the past thought, oh, this could never happen, or that would never happen, or I don't have to have any sort of preparation for any sort of civil unrest or interruption of the economy or anything like that. I think we've all been, just shell shocked, that way.
Yeah, we're all going a little crazy given the situation that all of us and pretty much around the world have been in. This situation reminds me a little bit of the Rodney King incident. And what I mean is there was a lot of racial unrest, for lack of a better metaphor. There was a lot of racial tension. That's what I want to say. And once that footage was caught on tape and proliferated through the media, I mean, it became extremely inflammatory. It just blew up.
Right.
And what we happen now is we've all been locked down for about 2.5 months, maybe a little bit less, maybe more, depending on where you are in the country or in the world. So that's going to have a negative effect on your mental health, no matter who you are. I don't care who you are. It's going to start driving you a little bit crazy. Even if you live in a nice house, we both live in nice homes and so forth, but still, just knowing that you can't just go do things. Sometimes I like to just get in my car and go play blackjack in the middle of the night.
Right.
And you can't do that. And I don't expect anyone to feel sorry for me for that, but I'm just making a point that When you
Yeah.
can't do what you're used to doing, and very suddenly too, it's not like we had a lot of preparation for this. It's not like we had warnings saying, hey, in about 90 days, this is what we're going to have to do. It was really fast. It was one day we were open, the next day we're closed. And
Yeah.
like you said, maybe we're going to be closed for 2 weeks, and then they kept extending it, and now it's been 2.5 months. And here in Vegas, it's still not fully open, but at least it's moving in the right direction. So you had that going on. And then what are people doing at home? If you want to be, some people found ways to be productive. You're exercising a lot. Maybe you're taking some online courses. Maybe you're taking time to spend more time with your family that you don't have a chance to do. So a lot of people took advantage of the time, but a lot of people didn't. But they're just watching TV all day, or they're following these discussions on social media. And then we had this convergence of events where you had the African American gentleman getting accosted by the crazy white lady in Central Park, and that was really. And imagine if he didn't have his camera.
And again, not to get political, but I do a lot of training up in New York and stuff. And I have to tell you, and I'm not trying to stereotype, but she is the perfect example of a virtue signaler who I'm sure everything else in her life is perfect. Like she does everything the right way. She's joined the right group. She says the right things. But the one time where she was so wrong with what she was doing with her dog. I mean, I've been out there with the dog parks in New York, especially in Central Park. You don't do that. You just don't. Right. You're a rude person if you do that. Yeah. And especially if somebody says, "Hey, could you put your dog back on?" I mean, so take that into account. She's just a rude person on top of that. But now what happens is, look how quickly she dumped all of her Upper West Side, politics and everything, and quickly just defaulted to, I mean, that was heinous what she did. It was absolutely heinous. That poor guy was sitting there. Thank God he had a video. Thank God that was filmed and all that other stuff, because she literally would have had no problem falsifying a report and getting that guy, God knows what would have happened to him, right. For something like that, because that's just it. And so you see that. Then you see the other gentleman that you're talking about, the guy that got shot by the two guys, running away, basically.
Like execution, I mean, from the footage I've seen anyway.
Yeah. And it looks bad. The problem is, and this is what happens, is get in these situations, and then all of a sudden, the scariest thing for me is not what's going on. It was like I feel like 9/11. Like when my friends, I had a lot of friends from Saudi Arabia, I had friends from overseas and stuff. I traveled all over, and I remember them all calling me after that went down. Like, oh wow, America really took a hit, blah blah blah. And I said, yeah, you guys don't know our history. I said, we have a long history of overreacting. I said, this is going to be ugly. And I said, and it's also not going to be necessarily targeted. It's going to be blanketed. And I said, a lot of mistakes are going to be made. It's coming in. So what's happening now is people are like, well, police aren't going to come here. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to be a vigilante, basically. And this guy, I guess, who was an ex-cop, the father, and the other one, it's just knucklehead stuff. I mean, it's not your freaking job. You're not part of law enforcement. This whole idea, I don't understand what it is. Like, in law enforcement, it's very specific. You have to have the right people to do this, because what is law enforcement's job? Law enforcement's job is to go to a call that they've been called on. They evaluate the situation. They see if any laws are being broken or anybody's being, any violence is happening. Their then job is to take whoever the perpetrator is, control him, and once he's controlled, you deliver him to the justice system. You do not deliver justice. You do not deliver punishment. You do not do any. As soon as the handcuffs are on and he is controlled, that's it, man. Your only job is now transport him in to the justice system, and he can go up and see the judge, have the jury, and then they'll decide what the deal is. Too many of these cops have just have forgotten that. And I don't know in this day and age how anybody could do it, because the other thing you and I haven't talked about that added to all of this is, unlike 1992 with Rodney, or 92 or 93?
92, yeah.
Or 92. Unlike then, we didn't have social media.
Right.
Now we have social media. Look what it did. It literally blew up all over the world now. Whereas before, LA was LA, and you had a couple of other places, but you didn't have this countrywide situation where the cities all blew up. And and even in LA, I'm trying to think, they never went up like into, they destroyed Rodeo Drive was destroyed. All these other areas were just absolutely taken out.
Right.
So we're seeing the effects of everybody being connected through these platforms and the groupthink that can happen and how quickly they can organize using Twitter, using Facebook, using all these things. And we have the potentiality now, if we do not have real talks and we do not do real reforms, this is only going to continue in the future because it's too easy for people to mobilize, and it's too easy for people to just run on emotion. And then people aren't thinking about the consequences of what they're doing, until it's too late, and that's the scary part for me with violence, because you can't take, once you cross that physical plane, how many times have we seen people yelling at each other and then one will go after and they'll run after somebody? I saw the other day, they were running after this one kid, and he went and he tripped and the kid pushed him and he went down and hit his head right away. And I'm sure that's not the intention. I'm sure the protester was just incensed this guy was either trying to protect a business or he was trying to do something like that. That was incensed. But the problem was he crossed the physical plane, and the unintended consequences were this guy's in a coma now, and they're pulling this guy. And if you asked everybody, would that pass the 3-day test that I was talking about, meaning the incident that you and I are so hyped up about, say we were really pissed off at each other, we're just about to go to blows, and then we catch our breath right before it's about to happen, and we both say to ourselves, shit, okay, 3 days from now, if I'm in a jail cell or I'm 6 feet under because of this incident, whether I intended it or not, would I tell myself 3 days later, yeah, there was nothing else I could have done. This is what I would have done. Very few things pass that test, and yet nobody's taking those breaths. Nobody's thinking. I've had people reach out to me, because I've got, all my clients, and I've had a lot of my clients reach out and they go, hey, I want to go march. I want to march to the protest. I want to do this. And I go, I totally understand that. And I would tell you in normal times, and what I mean by normal times, I mean not after everybody's been locked up, not after we've had all these other things, not in such a contentious year that we already had. I just said to people, I go, hey, just look at the risk reward. You can support the protesters without having to physically put yourself out there, because if you physically put yourself out there, now there's a lot of unintended consequences because you're not the only one out there. There are agitators out there. There are triggered people. There are business owners that are pissed off. There's a lot of potentiality for violence. And is that really, yes, you're trying to let people know that this is important to you and that you believe that, but is it worth you physically taking that risk? And some people didn't like that answer. They wanted me to tell them, like, how they could fight off 20 people at once or do all this other stuff. I'm like, no, dude, no, you obviously have not really listened to what I've been saying all these years. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where the potentiality for mob mentality or groupthink can just run you places you don't want to run,
I don't think people realize how out of control mob mentality can get. And what I'm seeing is nowhere in the ballpark of what I'm about to say, but I feel it's getting there. It's starting to get there. What I'm talking about is the genocide that happened in Rwanda. Remember that during the Clinton administration? 800,000 people butchered, mainly with machetes, in 90 days.
Yep.
And it started with two tribes, one that the Tutsis blaming the Hutsus, essentially. Right. I'm just going to oversimplify here because I don't remember all the details. But it started off with a lot of rhetoric.
Right.
These people are the problem. Now, before all this rhetoric started, they were fairly peacefully coexisting.
They intermarried. There was a lot of stuff. It was good. And by the way, this isn't like it's two groups that are really easy to distinguish. They literally look the same. Like right. there's no. You had to sit there. It's kind of like it's kind of oftentimes in the Muslim world, it's the Shiites and the Sunnis. Until if somebody's not talking, you don't know two people. One of them would have to tell you, yeah, I'm a Shiite, I'm a Sunni, right. And yet they'll go and. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mike. I mean, I also equate it to the, I believe it was Serbia during the Balkan Wars.
Right.
You had this one town where you had Muslims and Christians that worked well together. The Christians went up, and they literally were throwing their Muslim neighbors, who they were fine with 2 days ago, throwing them off the bridge. What happens is, what people don't understand. I think one of the best quotes I ever heard was I believe it was Dave Grossman was talking about it. And he talks a lot about, the bulletproof mindset and what, he trains a lot of operators on how to do things. And his thing about groups was always this. He said, always remember, he goes, individuals can love, groups hate.
Right.
He said, the groupthink does not have the capability to love as a group. He said, you can love everybody around you. And, you can do that individually. But when you get in this group, those same people that are great people can just switch. I remember in my early military days, I did a little bit of time over in Beirut. And what was crazy was you'd go to like the Christian section, everybody be cool to you. You go to the Muslim section, everybody be cool to you. You go to the Druze section, everybody be cool to you. If you brought one person from, say, the Muslim section over to the Christian section or vice versa, those same great people that are literally opening your house to you, letting you sit down and eat, they'd be going at it right away. They'd literally they all thought would go out and they become a group. They become part of their group, almost like kind of a gang mentality type thing. And that's the danger thing for people. It's like, it's not that there aren't a lot of great people in these protests. There are good people in there. The problem is the mob mentality taking over the group is really scary. And we've seen it happen multiple times since these things have started,
Yeah, it reminds me of this book called The Lucifer Effect. Have you read that book?
No, I've not read that.
Okay, that's a book. I'll send you some information on it. It came out a while back, but I mean, the book had a serious impact on me because the premise of the book is that everyone is capable of the most evil, nefarious acts you can imagine. Everyone, you, me, everyone, especially if there's a convergence of situational forces. And one of them is the mob mentality, because like you said, all of a sudden who you are as an individual just shuts off. Yeah. So if it's kind of like what we see with the looting. If one person, if I go down the street and someone's stealing from CVS, that's not going to inspire 50 other people who see that one person to go steal. They're going to be like, oh, wow, that's terrible. But if 100 people are running in the store and they're just grabbing stuff, and then another 100 people run in the store, and now it's thousands of people, they're going to say, okay, well, I guess it's a free-for-all right now. My friend Ori Ortega, I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and he said in Panama during the invasion, what happened is people started looting stores out there. And he had friends who were like, yeah, we're going to go to the store and get some Air Jordans. We're going to get some shoes. They saw it as a free-for-all. And he's like, that's stealing. They're like, no, it's not stealing. Everyone's doing it. So that's a scary line of thinking, too. If everyone's doing it, it's not a problem now. It's it's kind of like they say, okay, here's a rough analogy, but if a woman's getting raped in an alley and one guy walks by, he's probably going to do something because he's the only one there. He's going to maybe call the police or do some kind of intervention. But if someone's getting assaulted and there's a lot of people around, now everyone's waiting for someone else to do something. It's like, well, I don't have to do anything. Someone else will do something.
Yeah. That's a perfect example. I remember I was in New York and I was walking across the street right by NYU. And Mike, this motorcycle came out of nowhere. Like, almost. I mean, I had the green light. He had the red light. It wasn't just me. It was a bunch of people. We're all walking across the street. He buzzes by me. Literally, I could feel like just whip right by my shirt. He goes in. He hits the van. Thank God there were no kids in the van, but he hit the back panel of the van, goes right in, hit, and he died instantly. He was just right there. I mean, literally right in front of me, right?
Wow.
But there's tons of people around. I saw this undercover car come out with 4 undercover cops. I saw that. I saw their badges. Like, oh, okay, cool. They saw it. I'm good. I kept walking, right? So I go to my meeting. I come back, and I see one of the cops. I go, oh, shit, it's still all roped off. And so I come by. I just go to one of the cops. I go, hey, you guys got everything you need, right? I go, because the guy almost hit me. I saw everything, He goes, what? You saw what? You saw everything? He goes, nobody saw anything. He goes, we can't get it. He goes, the cops that pulled up, they didn't actually see the event. They saw it after that. They didn't know what happened. So only because I just reached out and asked, again, it was that mob thought process of, oh, somebody else will say it. Somebody else will do that. And it's like, you remember it caught me because I remember calling my wife and saying, wow, I really learned a valuable lesson today. Don't assume that, somebody else is just going to do this, because they locked the place down for an hour and a half trying to figure out what happened. And I was one of the only people that was still around that actually saw the whole event, and so this happens everywhere else where you can get swept up into
Right.
this mob mentality, and we're not immune to it. We'd love to think that we're going to be the one that's going to stand against everybody, but quite honestly, Mike, if you've ever had literally a mob staring you down and coming down, it's one of the most intimidating things. I mean, you just there's very little that you can do in a situation like that, that you can survive, especially when people aren't listening to logic. It's just full of rage. If you say anything that they deem is not correct, you're going to just get it's going to be swiftly dealt with violence in the most part, and overabundance. And do you see some of these people doing the violence? It's like these skinny little guys that are going around kicking people in the head, doing stuff. I mean, these are not people that are physical thugs that you can see doing it. They turn themselves into it, and then they tap literally into the worst parts of humanity.
Right. I think we're seeing at a lot of the protests are that there's people that have really good intentions, and we could say most of the people there have good intentions. And then there's people that are opportunistic and they're taking advantage of a situation. They're not trying to further some social cause. They're going down, with this chaos going on, we can go loot whatever store we want because the police are going to be overwhelmed. They can't be everywhere at the same time. So they're criminals basically that are taking advantage of a situation. And then you have some people that are similar to someone who just goes to a bar looking to get into a fight. That's the intention. So they're going down there looking to escalate things.
Yep.
The problem is going right back to this Lucifer effect. I wonder if you have any thoughts on this. What effect does just putting the uniform have on someone's psyche? Because in the Lucifer effect, they quote the Stanford study. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this is a study where it was basically role playing. They brought in some students and they said, okay, you're going to be the police officers, group A, group B, you're going to be the prisoners. And within a very short time frame, I think it was only a matter of days, the people that were playing the guards, the prison guard roles, started becoming abusive. They started abusing power. And the people that were playing the prisoner role, they started acting out. And they had to shut this whole experiment down because it was escalating real fast. And this wasn't over the course of several months. I want to say this whole thing unraveled in less than a week. It might have been even a few days. So I'm wondering what effect does just having the uniform have on in dehumanizing other people from you? So like, okay, I'm the law now, so I'm not going to see people as people. They're potential criminals. And then people seeing someone in a uniform and thinking, okay, and already being intimidated. Because any of us who've ever been pulled over just for a traffic violation, even that's intimidating. You're pulled over and waiting for this guy to come over and he's knocking on the door. You're like, maybe let me make sure I don't make any sudden movements. And this person has all the power. And I've been on the receiving end of racial profiling or clearly racist, dealing with racist cops. And that's even more intimidating. Because you're like, wow, what are they going to do to me in this situation? You're trying to stay as calm and cool as possible because you realize that anything you say that escalates the situation is going to be potentially disastrous for you.
Yeah, you're it's funny. I'm trying to discipline myself to look at the camera and not you. but
well, right in front of you. Okay, I was wondering what you were looking at. I go, what's up there?
I'm actually looking at you, and it's a bad habit. I got to get better at this. No, what's interesting is I see that in my life on a regular basis. Sasha, my wife. My wife is pretty much and I never understood when I first met her. She said, please, 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 when you're introducing me to people, just tell them I'm a yoga instructor. Just tell them I'm a yoga instructor. Right. She is a yoga instructor. And that whole thing, because Mike, it's a physical change when people find out she's a cop, or if they see her in her uniform. It's there. And Sasha's, she's huge on community policing. She's big on all this. She reaches out to all the things. She's Latina. She her whole thing is all about inclusiveness and all that. Does not matter. There's that effect that you're talking about. And when you put it on, that's what she talks about all the time. She goes, there are those idiots that put the uniform on, they got the gun belt, and now they think they are a supreme being and that they can just mete it out. And it's a, inferiority complex, whatever you want to say. I mean, I don't want to be a dime store psychologist, but you do see that effect. And then you see people who immediately, they could really like the person, but then they see the uniform and it just, boom, it goes back into that. My group's experience with the police has been X. It's easy for me to say, hey, I've always had a positive experience with law enforcement. Not really, but I have for the most part. And I've known people in the law enforcement community for a long time. So I see all aspects of it. But again, I have no illusions that my experience mirrors any of the kids that have had to deal with racial profiling or any of the stuff or being, I mean, I would be incensed if I was just pulled over because I might have looked like somebody. The only time I experienced that, big time, was when I was coming back from, I was going over to Scotland to train a military group over there with my partner, and they pulled me out of the UK. They pulled me out because my name was Larkin, and Timothy Hurley Larkin. It's about as Irish as you can get, and my lineage goes back that there. We actually have a family in Galway, and part of the family back in the day was part of the IRA. I had nothing to do. I mean, I'm third generation Irish American, but they pulled me out and they put me into secondary, and it was merely because of my name, and it was merely because I was an American Irish. In American Irish, there are groups within America that send money to the IRA back then, especially back then. It was in the 90s. And I remember being freaking incensed that they did that, because I had trained their military, I had gone to school over there, I had done all this stuff, and yet none of that mattered, and so and I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to equate the two. I'm not. It's a very minor thing that I got profiled on, and it pissed me off, just that mild one that I had to go through. So I get that, but I think really what really needs to happen is policing needs to change to be far more outgoing in the communities. And that doesn't mean, hugs and kissing babies or anything like that. It means doing the work that you've got to do. You've got to outreach to all these communities. You've got to talk to people ahead of time. You got to get them there. Because if not, the communities that are going to get hit the worst are the ones that we're trying to help the most, like the ones that really need it. It's their schools that are going to get destroyed. It's their stores. It's their economy. Who's going to want to go back in, especially if you say, oh, hey, we're going to defund the police and we're going to pull them out of there, and we'll come up with some sort of a local civilian guard or something like that. And then Walmart says, oh yeah, no problem. We'll go back in. We'll build here. Or CVS will say, we'll build here. No, they're not. They're going to want that, because it's a lot of damage has been done. I mean, that those stores are trashed, and it affects the local community. But the thing is I think all of us have to look at the complete lack of leadership on both sides of the aisle, as far as our politicians are concerned. Both sides are terrible right now, and they're so horrendous, and all they give a shit about is a potentiality for a vote. So they will do they will encourage dangerous protocols if they think it'll benefit them politically, and that to me is just crazy. And then and on the side, like the right, some of the stuff on the right where they're just they're blanketing stuff, this is ridiculous, everything's fine. No, it's not. We've had systemic problems with police officers getting disciplined and being put back on the force. This has been going on for 20, 30 years minimum, and it's not addressed. And then everybody's surprised when it finally happens. I haven't had one situation that I know of where a police officer has done something heinous like this, where there haven't been issues before. There haven't been precursors to this type of behavior, and that has to definitely be addressed. That said, people also have to understand that judicious use of the minimum amount of violence needed to effective arrest is absolutely critical. You have to be able to do that, and you have to know how to do it. What I tried, and even now, I got not really in a controversy, but I was ignorant enough to think I could post something about this and talk about the mechanics of it, the mechanics from the injury standpoint, because that's what I do. Right. And I was trying to show everybody, and people took that. I had a couple of guys. I had great conversations, by the way. I had great conversations with both the individuals that said something about it. They thought I was being insensitive using it as a, quote unquote, a teachable moment, what they said. Right. And I said to them, I said, you know what? I never thought of it coming off that way, but you're absolutely right. So let me preface everything. And I told, I laid it out. But what was interesting was I had said in my post, other people have written far more eloquently than me about the racism and the racism and the politics of this situation. I said, so I don't want to do that. I want to look just solely on the mechanics side of things and just say there is no justification for this arrest procedure. And what I try to do with cops all the time is a lot of their arrest procedures it's just a complete lack of knowledge of anatomy of the human body. You know, I talked about like this one, the first time I really saw it was in Australia. There was a video that they showed me, and this one cop was effecting an arrest, didn't realize that he had his knee right over the lower margin of the rib cage, right above the spleen. And so as he was trying, this guy was resisting arrest, but he wasn't like, you know, like violently resisting, but he was resisting. And this guy trying to control the arms was every time his body weight was going up and down on his knee, right on that spot, and ended up bursting the guy's spleen and killing him. And it was just through anatomy ignorance. You know, the guy did not want to do that, but he's there. So I've been talking about better training, because one of the first things that, you know, I cringed when they said defund the police, because the first thing that gets defunded is training. Yeah, training goes up when they look, they will cut the training budget to nothing, and that's one of the biggest problems right now is the cops aren't getting trained. You know, and I'm not saying, listen, I don't want to equate saying that a racist, bigoted cop who is a murderer, like somehow, if he had the right training, that it wouldn't have happened. No. But if you have
people, I think that's where people got confused with your post. Exactly. I read the post you saw on Instagram, and I saw some of the comments, and I think maybe they don't know you personally or anything, so they don't know your intentions. So they tended to over fixate on that. They're going, oh, this guy, they thought you were saying that he just didn't know better, and that's why he did that. If he had better training, then it wouldn't have had this outcome. So they're thinking, no, this was intentional. He intentionally did this, which is clearly what it looks like to me as well. But that goes to show you just how ineffective social media is as a way to engage in very important conversations or very important topics, because those salient points don't come through. It's easy to misinterpret things.
No, and I was clunky in my delivery. You know, it actually was a good teachable moment for me, because I thought I had clearly laid out that I'm not justifying any of this. I'm just going to look at the mechanics of it, because that's my specialty. That's what I tend to do with people. And when, what I forgot, there's one thing like I hear, it's mostly on the right. You hear these guys say this stuff all the time. It's this little trite phrase they love, which is, facts don't care about your feelings. Well, as you and I, if we want to engage somebody, we have to engage people emotionally first, right? And then they'll listen to facts once you have them. So emotion is absolutely key. And I absolutely forgot it. I absolutely forgot it when I did that post, and so it was good for me to get that. And I had some good back and forth with a couple of my clients who just wanted clarification. They were polite. They were totally cool about it. But I felt I go, man, you got a great point. And then I posted a video the following day talking about the conversation I had with those guys and saying, hey, clarification. I should have come right out and said this first. Boom, 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 boom. I thought I said it this way, and that helped. But we have to sit here and say, okay, what's our go forward? My big thing with my clients is I just want them to know that, I've never been one of these super preppers or any of that kind of stuff, the world's ending, doomsday. Yeah. But what's really interesting is everything that's been said for the last 10 years in the preparation market, ever since really 9/11. What's funny is how much of it came to fruition these last couple of months. Yeah. And so there are some practical measures that we all need to look at, and I think in the future we will all do. I think we all understand that taking things for granted. I mean, I'll just transition into this, and we can come back to it later if you want. But sure. One of the biggest shocks for me, and I think I shared this with you earlier, was I had what I thought were 4 separate streams of income coming in business-wise. What I didn't know my own vulnerability, because it was never in the back of my mind thinking, hey, Tim, 3 of those streams of income require people to have face-to-face contact and work with each other. Right. Speaking, my speaking gigs, my training requires people to be able to literally interact with each other, on top of each other, doing things. And then the last thing was my other business, the Machine Guns Vegas business. We do one-to-one with people on shooting firearms. And so they have to literally be right there.
Right.
All three of those got shut off like that.
Yeah.
Luckily, because I had the online business and my email list and my direct marketing, I was able to, keep that income coming in. But for me, it was like 3 streams just literally dried up overnight.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It shows you how vulnerable you are. What I thought about a lot is if this whole situation happened when, let's say, between around 2011 and 2013, when the majority of my income was traveling around the world, not even just training people personally, but I was on a plane all the time going to other countries. And most of my income was that because I was in a transitional phase. I hadn't transitioned into the supplement business yet. It was just emerging. So most of my income was that.
Yeah.
If this happened then, that would have just shut all of that off. And I have online consulting like you do. I could have ramped that up. And my income wouldn't have gone down to zero, but it would have gone down a great deal.
It's so funny because I was thinking about you because our conversations, we usually try to get together every so often. And our last conversation was I was thinking about the fact that, man, it's just fortunate that Mike made the pivot when he made it. You were getting burnt out from traveling anyways and all that. And so, but I was sitting there thinking, man, in retrospect, you look like a genius, that you did that. But it was just more than it's where your business was going. But because guys who continue to do what you do, like friends of mine that are training, I got a lot of spec ops trainers, I got all these, they're all dead in the water right now,
I could have been negatively infected more so as well, though, because fortunately, the fulfillment company I use, I believe you use them as well, Vervante, they didn't shut down. They could have said, look, it's not safe for our workers to be there, in which case I would have had to take care of orders myself or pay a few people to do it. So I would have found a way to keep going, but it would have been a lot of work.
Would have put a big glitch in you right away.
Be driving to the post office every day, especially for international orders, having to fill out customs forms and all that. So I'm lucky in the sense that they stayed open. I'm also lucky that my inventory was pretty good at that time, because if I just happened to be in a really low inventory state where I'm waiting for the next batch to come in, where I'm thinking, it's going to take a couple of weeks, that could have been shut down for months.
Absolutely.
So I'm very vulnerable too. So it gave me a lot of food for thought on things that I need to do to make my business more of a fortress, so it's not so easily penetrated. But I'm fortunate in the fact that I was able to ride through this, and that's why when I would have these discussions with people about how the lockdown is having such a negative impact on so many people, some people would be like, well, your business is doing all right, so what are you worried about? I was like, well, I'm not that selfish of a person where I think that just because my business is doing okay, that means everyone's okay. I'm thinking about people that lived paycheck to paycheck before this thing happened. I'm thinking about people with mental health issues who are just barely staying on top of that. They're getting therapy, maybe their job helps, they're interacting with friends, and now they're isolated at home. I'm thinking about people who don't have anyone in their life. They live alone. They don't have any close friends. They don't have any close family members, and maybe the only interactions they had were through their jobs or being out and about, and now that's gone. So you had to take yourself outside of yourself. And in the news, I noticed that the people that were saying, look, we need to be really patient, this is really deadly, those were always people that either had a lot of income or were getting stimulus checks and unemployment, where in some cases it surpassed what they were making when they were working. So they're in no hurry. They're basically on paid vacation. They're going, hey, this is great. Let's ride this out as long as I can. And then
it's very funny that you see people like that they're so tone deaf that they don't realize. And what's really sad? Where the only place I have seen consistent, and one can say, oh yeah, it's because they want to show Americans in suffering, but the only news service that I've seen that's consistently shown real business owners and people that have really been affected by losing their jobs and everything, what that means. I mean, they showed a food line in LA that the cars went back 2 miles, wow, to pick up food. I mean, it was Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera was showing they've done some excellent reporting on that and the real effects of this. And that's what I'm more worried about. That I have a very good friend in town. He owns tons of restaurants. He's a very successful entrepreneur on a lot of different levels. He told me from his discussions with everybody, I mean, he's got the financial runway that he's fine. Because of the other money that he's made in the past. But he told me, Tim, he goes, I'm looking around, he goes, most of the people I'm talking in Vegas, he goes, I think it's up to 50% of the restaurants won't be able to reopen.
Wow.
I mean, that's what we're talking about. And like you said, we haven't come out of this far enough to see the devastation yet. And I think that's going to be the next thing that people are going to start discovering over the summer is just how much of a hit we took, and what the go forward is. And I think a lot of the optimism is unfortunate, because a lot of the optimism is people that took their business, because I know we did this with a couple of our businesses. We line itemed everything. And I know people are coming back a lot leaner, and they're not going to rehire everybody. They're just not, and that's going to have an effect on the economy.
And then you have to wonder, what are the perilous consequences of a large percentage of people being unemployed and then eventually becoming desperate, where all of a sudden they're going, look, I don't want to loot this place, but I've got kids at home, I've got responsibilities, and I have to put their priorities first. Yeah. And that one thing that drives me crazy about a lot of people is that when they come from privileged backgrounds, or even if they didn't come from privileged backgrounds where they were able to become successful, they sometimes think, okay, I did it, everyone else should be able to do it. I don't feel sorry for these people and all that. And I go, forget about feeling sorry for people and forget about helping people in need. What you have to realize is that it's a national security issue when a certain percentage of the population falls through the cracks.
Oh, yeah.
And no one cares. Eventually, it affects everyone. If we have 20% unemployment for a year, no one's safe at that point. Because you have a high percentage of the population that is extremely desperate, and we see that in other countries.
Yeah, and dude, we know better than anybody. People aren't cut out to be entrepreneurs, and I don't mean that in some macho sense. No, I mean it can really suck. There's a lot of things, and it takes a lot of most people go to a job and they do their job and it's done. They don't have to worry about the lights staying on. They don't have to worry about the payroll. They don't have to worry about, if you're an entrepreneur, business owner, you're juggling all those things. So it's only going to be a small percentage that's going to want to do that, that type of stuff. And therefore it would be completely, devoid of compassion for us to sit there and go, oh, just go do what I do. I wouldn't want people to have to do what I did a lot of times, right. I know how it is, and I know what it can do to you if it goes wrong, just certain people, like I'm not cut out for certain things, I know that, there's certain jobs I could never do. I know during this cut down, I could never be a freaking kindergarten teacher. My kids have driven me crazy during this time, and I love them to death, but I'm just like, oh my gosh, they never stop talking. They're just like, da, 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 the whole time. So I know that sounds. I
didn't realize how annoying my kids are until I was stuck at home with them for 2.5 months. And then,
did you notice all the memes stopped about how great my kids are and all that stuff? You see none of those during this.
And then you also saw how many relationships are contingent on having space, meaning that maybe one person works at home, the other person's out there, or both people are out there. So you have time away from each other.
Yeah.
You don't realize how important that is until you're all stuck together. It reminds me, like, as a kid, I was stuck on these camping trips with my parents. We'd be in this camper in Montana for 3 months, and I would go crazy there. I go, this sucks. I mean, one year I actually took a summer school class that I didn't need to take just to get out of that. I was like, hey, I need to take this course, otherwise I'm not going to graduate on time. They're like, okay, you can stay home. I'm like, whew. I found a way to get out of that. So a lot of people just being locked down for a long period of time, and 2.5 months is a long period of time.
Yeah, it is.
There's people who didn't even realize they had mental health issues, maybe because they were busy, or they're distracted, or they were just living their life, so they didn't really think about it. But now they've been stuck alone for a while, and these things are surfacing. And in some ways, that's good. If you have mental health issues, you don't want to distract yourself. You want to get addressed. But at the same time, if too many people have mental health issues at the same time, I mean, too many new cases, that's another factor that has potentially really negative consequences.
Well, and the weird thing too is with COVID and everything, people are scared still. They're still scared to go seek help.
100%.
It's crazy. Like, I'm talking to all my doctor friends, and they're just like, yeah, we got nothing to do. We're sitting around twiddling our thumbs, basically.
Like Dr. Garcia, our mutual friend, he's a plastic surgeon, and he had a lot of things lined up before the whole pandemic kicked in, and all of that stuff canceled just like that.
Oh, yeah.
So his income, and he's a world respected plastic surgeon. Awesome. Yeah. People from all over the world come to work with this guy, and his business just shut down like that. I mean, he was able to keep things going, but not even close to being at the same level. And only now is it starting to pick up again.
Yeah. And you think somebody at that level, you'd never think they'd be affected by that. But again, if you can't have close proximity, how many, we've learned how many things have been affected. And,
Right.
It'll all shake out. I imagine within the next 2 years, we'll find out whether or not these protocols, in retrospect, were the right way to go. But regardless, we have to deal with what we're dealing with right now.
Right.
And right now, my big concern for everybody is the emotional sweep that our country's taken, the polarization that's even getting worse, which I didn't think it'd get much worse, but I was wrong. I was really wrong. And so I try to tell people from that aspect is it's even more important now that you are in tune with the potentiality for violence, and that
No doubt.
and that the first hint, even if you feel ridiculous, just get yourself out of there, man. You don't want to be caught in something that can just go, just erupt, and you're caught in the center of it, because getting out of something like that is really difficult. We've got people that are crippled, we've got people that are dead, we've got people that are really severely maimed, from frenzied mobs, basically.
Yeah.
It's not, like I said, if we grabbed everybody individually, there's no way they'd be doing all this stuff. There'd be one or two that probably are just inherently asocial and violent. Okay. But the group, what we're seeing now is we're just seeing this group mentality take over, and they just, like I said, I watched some of the violence, and I can tell just by the way the guy's doing it. He's never even done that before. He's never kicked anybody in the head before.
Right.
And yet that's what he's doing now, because structurally, you can tell when somebody is a fighter and when they do stuff on a regular basis. You're seeing a lot of people that this is probably the first violent thing they've ever done in their life, but it's pretty severe. I mean, it's definitely not, a slap fight. They're really trying to injure people, and it's sad.
And they don't have any problem doing it in the context they're in.
They feel justified.
Other people doing it, they feel perfectly justified that this is something I can do now. I don't think people realize how fragile civilization is. It's a very thin line, and it doesn't take much for it to cross that line and then do things that you didn't even realize you were capable of. I mean, sometimes I'm in situations where I'm walking across the street and a car almost hits me. And I get really mad. I get really flushed. I'm like, what the hell are you doing and all that? I don't know who's in the car, though. Sometimes it's tinted windows. I know there could be a guy with a shotgun in the car who goes, you want to go down? Let's go. Let's do it. So sometimes
he's just looking for that reason, and you just gave it to him.
Or just looking for it. You just gave it to him. But that's not even a conscious reaction. It's just an unconscious reaction that I have to be aware of, because that's just my automatic response. And then I try to dial it back. But by the time you've done the automatic response, it could be too late if it's the wrong situation.
Yeah, and people try to equivocate a lot. They try to they try to say, well, this is different because of this, and it's like, no, it's just this is your reason for doing violence. This is this got you there, and now you think because you think you're a good person, therefore you have to have a justified reason for doing what you're doing, and so you do this rationalization that humans tend to do, and that's the problem. And right now, also, social media is backing you up. If you have these, they're saying, that this isn't violent. You have a right to loot. You have a right to destroy these businesses. You have a right to attack anybody that questions what you're saying. If they don't do exactly what you think they should be doing, yes, you need to, school them, basically.
Right.
And that just, that is going to have a huge effect. Like I said, I would counsel everybody between now and the November elections, just think and double think about what comes out of your mouth and where you choose to spend your time, on here, because this isn't going away. This cauldron and this anger on both sides is not going to go away. And especially now they're pitting red states against blue states, and they're doing all this stupid political shit on top of a really bad situation. Like the fact that they politicized a pandemic, something that affects everybody across the board. It does not discriminate. Doesn't care if you're black, white, doesn't care if you're gay, straight, doesn't care if you're Republican, Democrat. It's a threat to the country. It's a national threat, and we should be looking at it that way. But we've turned all these issues that used to be, we all agreed, hey, national security issue here, or this issue. Now, nope, everything's politicized. Everything has to be, either this way or that way, and there's no nuance, because binary is just way easier. It's binary for them is yes, no. I don't want to know the details.
Right.
I mean, I hear people all the time about it.
Yeah, there was so much fear that was promulgated during this whole process. And I think that's why, like you said, I'm surprised how fast everyone just fell in line. And I think part of it is because so much fear was put out there that people thought if they're even exposed to this thing, it's a death sentence. So when you think that, you're going to go into this paranoid state. And then every day the narrative changes, said, okay, the virus lasts on surfaces for several hours. And then it came out many months later, oh, actually it doesn't. Wearing a mask doesn't help. Oh, actually, wearing a mask does help. Everyone should be wearing a mask. Shame on you if you don't wear a mask. You're going to harm people you come across. If you don't care about yourself, think about other people. Everyone should be wearing a mask now. And people, the next day after that came out, everyone was wearing masks, or at least a large percentage of people were.
Well, and now it just came out there where they're saying, I forgot who it was, either World Health or one of the other ones, saying that wearing a mask now might make it worse for you personally. When you come in. So there's all these, and listen, we know, being in the fitness world, how many times have we been saying, okay, take creatine, don't take creatine, don't, just, it's the equivocation of that kind of stuff. It's just start, stop, it's to the point to where you just have to start making your own decisions and be comfortable within there. I will wear masks, even though I personally, from everything I've seen, I question the validity of it, but I'm not playing that game. I'm not going to sit here and be, I'm not wearing a mask or something. It's like, hey, if I'm going to go into a place and they require you to wear a mask, I'm going to wear the mask right now. Not because I'm being compliant, but because I'm trying to be a good human. Because there's probably somebody in there that's scared to death. They've been fucking, and they finally went out of the house, and now I look like the asshole who's going to infect them. When I come in, and I don't want to be that guy. Do I maybe not agree with the way they look at it? Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't. What does it cost me? It costs me a little bit of annoyance that I put a mask on while I'm in Costco or wherever I go, and I just do it. I don't I have so many friends that are being militant about it. I'm not gonna wear the mask. It's all bullshit. Blah blah blah. I go, dude, just stop. This country's scared right now. You can have that belief, but if you're gonna go out in public, don't scare people. Don't do stuff like that. Just don't go to those stores. If you have to wear a mask and that's a problem for you, don't go.
Right.
It's not going to last. This is going to pass. This time will pass. But right now, I'm just trying to be a good neighbor, basically, with everybody. Is to that point. I don't want, especially older people. I know my mom and dad, they're 80. They just turned 80 this year. They're scared to death. They're living in San Diego, and they're in that though. They're healthy they're super healthy, but they truly they bought in hook, line, and sinker, and they feel like they are just somebody around. If they don't have a mask on, they're trying to personally infect them. And even when they're outside, they're outside in this beautiful little park in San Diego, more than 6 feet, if not 20 feet away from people, and they're still worried. So I get that, and it's only because of the media and social media just fomenting all this. Why? It gets more looks. It keeps you on the platform longer. Just all this insidious stuff that isn't good for us, but we're addicted to it. We're addicted to outrage. We're addicted to all this, and especially think about it. We started out this pandemic. Everybody's like, first week, everybody's like, yeah, this is great. Everybody's watching Tiger King and doing TikTok videos, and it's funny. And that lasted about 2 weeks. Everybody's okay, and then it started to get ugly. Then after that, that's when people started realizing, oh, this isn't going to just go away. We're going to have to deal with this for now 2.5 months or whatever. Right. So yeah, it's a really. This will be a very interesting period to study later on when they can actually cut through all of the BS and actually investigate all the data. It'll be really interesting. But living in it right now, I think we just have to take that approach that, listen, I want to take care of me and my family and my friends, and I want to be as good a neighbor as anybody else. But I also would tell everybody, start thinking about your own personal security plan. And I don't mean some crazy bug out bag where you've got 80 weapons or anything like that, but just personally, just look at your house going, okay, am I locking all the doors? Am I doing all my basics? Because I'm telling you, there's crimes of opportunity going on right now by desperate people that probably never normally would they might have only got one stimulus check, if that. And so they haven't been paid for over 6 weeks, and there's going to be that. So you're just going to have to be a lot more vigilant and watch what goes on. Because I think, like you and I were talking at the beginning of this, I think the repercussions haven't really been seen yet. I think we're going to find the repercussions of the economic devastation more towards the end of the summer. We'll see what we're dealing with,
Right. No, 100%. And then during this whole thing, we kept on hearing about only essential businesses can stay open. Okay, well, if my business is my income, it's essential to me at least.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then Dunkin' Donuts was open. Okay, why is that essential? I mean, it's essential in the sense that that's a business that has a right to be open, but they're not providing anything that's useful for keeping you healthy, for keeping your immune system healthy, for fighting off COVID-19. And then there was never any information pushed out about the best defense you have is to be as healthy as possible. If you've never taken your health seriously before, now's the time. Time to address that high blood pressure. You have 2.5 months. You could have gone from high blood pressure to optimal in 2.5 months with the nutrition and the right training regimen. You definitely could have. Obesity puts you at a higher health risk. Diabetes. These are all things that you could have made serious improvements on over the course of 2.5 months.
And again, those are subjects that, and you're absolutely right. And I imagine if we brought those up right now, we'd be vilified. It's like it's like you're not, it's not, and nothing's ever my fault. It was a great time for me to look within. Like, I'll tell you a perfect example. I didn't have the health issues, obviously we're talking about, but I had the business health issues. Right. And that's why, you're seeing the background now. I've got everything up there. I've been doing a lot more, outreach. I went out and landed 2 sponsorships that I wanted to get part of, and equity positions in those companies. I just realized that, hey, you got to make these pivots and go. Now, granted, I have 25 years of being in the business, and I'm able to outreach, but I force myself to do the pivots now, because I realize I don't ever want this to happen again. I don't want to be in a position where all of a sudden I'm shut down. And luckily I had one stream of income left. But I want to diversify more. So what are more things I can do that don't rely on one-to-one situations, people having to meet with each other, or me having to be someplace to specifically deliver the information.
Right.
And so it's forced me to look again.
How do you see your business moving forward, though? Because like you said, you're so reliant, or at least a large percentage of your revenue is reliant on actual in-person courses, traveling around the country, teaching courses. Have you thought about how are you going to teach a live course now with the restrictions that are currently in place?
I believe that those will eventually be lifted. And I'm saying in the next 3 to 4 months. I believe you can go back to normal. I'm not saying I'm going to go back to normal, though. I think I sat there and looked at it and I said, hey, what is really optimal? Is it good for me to be running around the country and around the world doing seminars for relatively, because unlike, how you had the same thing when you put on a seminar with Kelvis, you're limited to your square footage, and you're limited to equipment that you can go, and you're also limited to instructor oversight. Right. Whereas our friends that do motivations and all that kind of stuff, they can put 500 people in the seats, and it doesn't matter because they're not going to be moving. So for me, I see it as I'll probably do 1 or 2 bigger events a year on live training. And I think the other thing I'm going to start doing is I'm bringing in more subject matter experts. So I'm kind of expanding my offering. I'm using more of those things. Live training, I love it, and it's always fun. But this is really showing me that I have to put it in the right perspective.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at. So I won't be as reliant on it as I was. I won't sit there and say, hey, that's like currently it was 25% of my income was live training, and I'd like to get that down to 10%.
Right.
And so replacing it with these new deals that I just did, and then when I do have that, then I really want to I actually want to make it a much better event now. I want to make it more, not only maybe charge a little bit more for it, but make it a more complete experience.
Right.
And so this has forced me to rethink live training. And so that's actually been good too.
I mean, I think even if you could resume live training like you did before the pandemic, it would be a much harder sell right now as well, because
Yeah.
people are like, well, I don't want to be doing hand-to-hand combat scenarios with someone that close together, and all of us are in this room.
Yeah.
It's-
Oh, yeah.
it would be hard to
Yeah,
get the
and I'm anticipating. I mean, I'm going forward like I'm not going to be able to do live training anymore,
right.
And so that's kind of my thought. Now, I don't think that's necessarily true, but if I operate that way, I'm going to be fine, with that. And Mike, it's causing me also to say, hey, I have to probably do more products. I have to do more. Maybe it's time for me to write another book.
Right.
I've got some good ideas. This actually spurred a lot of good, subject matter for me. And what's really interesting is the Antifa stuff that's been coming out purely on how to do violence to people. Like, they've actually put out some really interesting stuff. It's all in alignment with what I've always like. None of it is sport fighting. None of it is martial arts or combat sports. It's all pure violence. They're showing people like, this is how you crush his throat. This is how you go after it. This is how you go after the cops. This is what you do. Really, really interesting. Same thing like when I study the prison gangs. It's very interesting when a group is like this, and they realize the goal is not to better a person in a violent act. The goal is to end a person. It's amazing how clear the instruction is. Like, they're very clear in their instruction. These people who really have no experience doing violence at all. They're basically all pretty new to it. So that was very interesting from my perspective to see how quickly that goes, because I've always said, one of my great friends that was one of my early mentors always told me, he said, hey, just remember, the human race is 3 days away from killing each other. All we have to do is make water scarce.
Right.
And he said, within 3 days, you'll die if you don't have water. He goes, people will absolutely, go at each other very quickly. He goes, and as long as you remember, the statement from the one of the Avengers movies where Nick Fury is talking about his grandfather, Samuel Jackson. He goes, yeah, my grandfather. He goes, he loved people, man. He'd walk down the street and he always put all his tips. He always put all his tips from shoe shining into a bag, into like a little lunch bag. And he'd walk down and people would sit there and say, oh, what do you got in there? He goes, oh, I got my tips. He goes, oh, maybe you should show it to me. He goes, sure, I'll show it to you. He'd open it up and he'd have a 22 in there, a gun inside it.
Right.
And his statement was, Grandpa always loved the humans. He goes, loves the human race, just doesn't trust anybody, And that's kind of how I say. I would say, hey, go in there, live a great life, but don't trust a mob, and don't trust, basic human person to do the right thing all the time, especially in desperate times.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing I would try to counsel everybody is just be extra aware, be extra thoughtful in what you say right now. And that people say, well, but I should be able to say whatever I want. I should be able to protest. Yes, you should be able to do that. But the reality is, if you do that, here's the risk. This it's blatant. Here's your risk. And if you're okay with that, that's fine. But, most people don't want to risk their lives over taking a position, and that's literally what you're doing in some of these situations,
To think it all the way through to possible consequences. I like what you say in your book about a lot of us think we have these social contracts. So if I get into an argument with someone at the park, we're not going to get into a fist fight. We're just having an argument. But it could. So people aren't thinking that it can go to a fist fight, especially a lot of adults, because they haven't been in a fist fight since they were in high school, if even then. So a lot of people,
they're shocked. Yeah,
I've seen people lose their temper in such ferocious ways. And I'm going, man, you don't realize what this could initiate in return for you. I mean, someone on the receiving end of that anger may think, okay, this guy wants to physically harm me, so I'm going to F him up right now before he gets it up. Even when the other person wasn't even thinking about taking it to a physical place. Because most people, when they get into these heated arguments, they're not thinking, okay, this may lead to a fist fight at some point. They're just not thinking that. They're not, and it could, or potentially something way worse.
Yeah, some people just go from zero to kill. And that's just it. And that's what people don't understand. They think there's this tit for tat escalation that you somehow can control. Right. And that's the dangerous thinking. You know, I used to tell people all the time, like, I had this scenario where I had somebody put a knife to somebody's neck, and they'll talk about, you know, being robbed and stuff. And I'll go, hey, so what's going through your head and stuff? And like, they say, okay, well, I gave my watch, I gave my wallet and everything, and he's going to go away. And I go, that's awesome. I said, so you thought it was like a transaction that you went on? And he goes, well, yeah, you know, I was able to talk my way out of it. And he thought he was using some of the skill sets that I said. And then I flipped it on him. I said, great, that's awesome. So when was the last time you put a knife to somebody's neck and robbed them? Never. I go, okay, so how do you know, since you've never done that, how do you know what's going on inside somebody's head that is doing that? And he goes, oh, yeah. He goes, you think maybe he might not have the same moral code you have and might not have any compunction to do grievous bodily harm to you just to do it? I said, you're just making assumptions. I'm not saying don't talk your way out of something. That's absolutely a valid way of doing things. But don't think that person is on your level. You right. know, and that's the whole thing. And if I would see some of these emotionally charged people that would come up, the dumbest thing I could do is say, hey, let me show you the entrepreneur lifestyle. You can come up here. Look at the view up here. The view up here is great. No, if somebody's down here and you're up here having a great life, and you're saying you don't have to live like this. The only way that happens is you have to drop down to their level, right. deal with them there, and then you get to go back up and live your life. You can't drag them up here. They have to want to go up there.
Right.
And that's where people screw up, because they'll misread a violent situation thinking, oh, this guy just doesn't understand. He doesn't really want to do this. He just needs to be shown that, you know, right. life can be like this, or that I'm right. And he's obviously wrong. Let me educate him. And as they're educating him, you know, they're feeling the knife going, you know, 4 or 5 times, basically.
I think some people just feel too safe.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, using your line of think, or what you said in a previous statement, yeah, you should feel safe. You should feel like you can walk around your neighborhood and no one's going to assault you. But that's not necessarily a reality. And most likely it's not going to happen depending on where you live. But you should be prepared for any possible outcome. Doesn't mean you have to be paranoid about it. Just have a little bit of situational awareness, because I see people walking around here in Seven Hills where they feel really safe. So there's a spot in my neighborhood. This guy has headphones on. I mean, the big ones where you could see them a mile away. And he's looking at his phone, walking down Grand Hills, which is a fairly street. A lot of cars go around there.
Yeah.
And every time I see him doing that, I'm going, man, you couldn't make yourself a larger human target if you tried. Because you are just an assaulter's dream right now. Like, here's a guy who has, his hearing it's basically sensory deprivation. Yep. He can't hear anything, and he's looking at his phone, so he can't see anything that's happening around him. Yeah. So he's not going to see anything coming. Someone could come up to him and just hit him on the back of the head. He's not going to have any chance to prepare any kind of defense in any way. And this is a guy who feels way too safe because he's never been assaulted. I'm assuming he's never been assaulted, because anyone who's ever been assaulted wouldn't feel that safe, even if it happened 20 years ago.
Yeah, I go back to, there's that famous Robert E. Howard saying that is, civilized men are more impolite than barbarians. Right. Because barbarians know that if they're impolite, they can get their head smashed in. Basically, right. It's a variation of that. It's not the exact quote, but it's along those lines. Whereas civilian, we get away with a lot of stuff that if you literally lived in a world, and that reminds me again of our old friend Charles Poliquin, who gave me that great story about when he would go to a new area, he would always talk to the local cops and say, hey, where do all the ex-felons work out? and people thought that was crazy, but when you've experienced that, like, some of the most polite people I've ever dealt with, believe it or not, have been in the prison system. A lot of these hardcore gang members, it's a mutual respect thing. And it's like, as long as you respect me and I respect you, you don't do anything, like, you don't go grab my weights, you don't walk in front of me while I'm doing a workout, that's what Charles liked it. He goes, because these guys had a code and they're in there and it was silent and everybody was actually really cordial and polite with each other, for the most part, because they understood that if they weren't, it would be backed up with violence, meaning the repercussions for being an asshole or being a jerk is, somebody's going to deal with you. And therefore, because that was a potentiality, people are actually more polite with each other when you're like that. I'm not encouraging that people do stuff like. I just think it's an interesting in a more violent, non-controlled situation where there is no law enforcement or anything like that. Basically, when you think about, because these gangs are left alone, basically in the penitentiaries for the most part, they police themselves. And how do they do it? They do it with very severe repercussions if you do anything. And that's where, like, the individual you're talking about, he lives in this bubble, and because it hasn't happened to him yet, he doesn't think it's going to happen, and therefore leaves himself fully exposed like that. So if somebody wants to take advantage of that, literally, if a guy is driving down the road and he's looking for an opportunity, a predator's driving down the road and he sees something like that, that's just a home run gift. It's an easy assault for him.
Ty Ritter, who's with Project Child Save, you're familiar with the organization.
Yeah.
Ty rescues kids that have been kidnapped and sold into sex slavery, human trafficking, and so forth. And he has gone undercover before as a predator. So he's pretending to be a child molester to interact with other child molesters, so he understands their psychology and how they do things.
Right.
And he said that a lot of these highly skilled predators, they'll tell you in a ostentatious manner that they can go to a park right now and get any kid they want. So if you said, I want a blonde kid 10 years or below, they're like, oh yeah, I can find one in an hour and come back. Because they know number one, a lot of people are always distracted. I see parents at the park with their kids all the time, and they're looking at their phones too, or they're talking to someone, their kid's 50 yards away. Yep. A lot of times I feel that I need to keep an eye on stuff. So when I'm walking around, I'm keeping an eye on these kids to make sure that no one has nefarious intentions, because no one else is. So I'm not saying parents. I'm just saying I see this often. And again,
but you see, the parents. Like, sometimes the parents look at you like they if you say anything, and I never say anything in a super like accusatory fashion. I just kind of like, hey, have you ever thought about this? They haven't thought of it. It's unthinkable to them.
That's the problem right there.
And the problem is, like, having kids, and it's not just because of my background, the fact that I'm married to a police officer. It's just common sense. I just realized that it's my job to protect this kid. It's not anybody else's. Meaning it's my primary job is to make sure this kid's safe while they're playing, while they're doing whatever. And I cannot expect this kid, people always ask me all the time, what do you think about kids' self-defense and all this other stuff? And I said, what's the purpose? And they'll say, well, the purpose is because, if a predator, no, worthless. I guarantee you, I said, I could bring a police actor right now who could get your kid into a van like that. I said, their minds aren't developed enough. There's too many ways you can manipulate a young mind that you can go in. And quite honestly, physically training them is not good. Now, if you want to do it because you want the kid to start learning some discipline, you want to get them, physical preparation for later, when they can get really, trained as a young adult. Yes, all that's great, but please don't do it with the idea that your kid's going to be able to fight off some adult or some predator like that. If anything, you're hoping it'll increase their situational awareness, which is a huge, which would be a huge win anyways. But yeah, and people don't like that. They don't like the fact that I do it. But I remember the blog post that I put in about that. I said, does a lion cub fight off the hyena, basically? And the idea was, in the wild, you've got the lions, out there with their cubs, and they're taken out, and the predators that come around the cubs are dealt with by the lioness, and they're dealt with the pride. The pride deals with that. They protect the kids. And I go, I know it's a shit answer. I know, but nobody wants to hear that. But as parents, it's our primary. We have to. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be a helicopter parent, but you have to be. You have to recognize that your child doesn't have the mental ability and the maturity to deal with these sophisticated, and they are sophisticated. They know exactly how to manipulate kids, and get them in and stuff. So that's a whole other aspect. But you're absolutely right, Mike. It's like we live in these bubbles, thinking that it could never happen to us, and they think you're being paranoid if you bring up something like this. And it's not it. It's what's great about it is, once you've got a plan together and you've looked at these subjects, first of all, there's a level of stress that drops because you've actually dealt with the issue, and you go, okay, I got a plan. I know if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. I'll give you a perfect example. My wife and I, when we got this house, one of the first things we did was looked at the layout. We looked at everything. We looked where the kids were, and we came up with it. I know if something happens, I know where Sasha goes. She has her phone. She's got her everything ready. She's got her phone, her radio, and her firearms, and she's taking the kids in. I know exactly where they're going to be in the back bathroom area, and I know the rest of the house is mine. And so I can go out and do that. And she understands, she's going to be calling in during that time, getting the kids in and giving the instruction on what's going on at that point. Simple plan. We kind of, we just kind of walked through it a couple of times, but we know, we had an incident. Thank God it wasn't anything. It was just some kids screwing around, but we activated the whole deal and boom, it just worked, and that's it. So people think you have to have these big elaborate plans and stuff. You don't. You just have to think about, hey, okay, worst case scenario, if I find myself in this situation, where are the exits? What are the danger zones? What am I going to do? What's available to me? Just all these little things, and the key is you want to do it. You don't want to do it when everybody's fighting over toilet paper. It's just, that's insane. It is insane that toilet paper was one of the things that just, went missing right off the bat.
Once the meat factories were in danger of shutting down, then people started hoarding that too. People are buying second riches because they're going, because that was in the news too. It's like meat shortages everywhere, escalating across the country. Better go get as much as you can while you can. It showed you, in a lot of ways, it was really disheartening to see how a lot of people reacted during this time period. And what I mean is there were senior citizens at the grocery store, and right in front of them, people are taking every can of whatever food was available, while some 65, 70-year-old lady has nothing left, and they don't even care. They could care less. They see these people. They're like, no, I got to get mine. I could care less about these people, to the point where some grocery stores had to say, look, between these hours, the first 2 hours that were open, it's only going to be senior citizens, which I thought was a great idea.
No, because I thought that was awesome.
It just showed you that there was no human decency, because believe me, if I were at a grocery store and I'm grabbing a couple things and I see some lady behind me waiting and I realize, wow, if I grab all of this, she's not going to have anything. I'm going to stop. In fact, I'll give it to her before I take care of myself, because I can get by. Maybe she can't. But it's just that. And then one time I was coming out of Target, and there was an old guy, and he had a disabled wife, and he was trying to push the cart, and he was trying to take care of her. And no one's holding the door open for this guy. No one cares. People just zipping by left and right. And I felt bad for the guy. So I said, hey, let me help you out. And he was so appreciative, or like it was the nicest thing in the world for me to do that, because so few people do that. And I'm not trying to give myself a big pat on the back here. I'm just trying to say that you got to get outside your own head sometimes and look at the larger picture. Because even if you don't care about other people, if you're the only one who's okay, like we're going back to what I said about my business. Oh, your business is fine, Mike. What are you worried about? I go, yeah, I'm not worried about myself. But that doesn't mean I'm not worried about other people as a compassionate human being, because
you got to live in this world. And
also,
so
I don't care about other people. If enough people are out there suffering to a certain intensity, it's not going to be safe for me either. That's just a reality. So if you're the only one at the grocery store getting food and toilet paper, and everyone else is left with nothing, you really think you're safe? They're going to be like, hey, that guy just left with a cart full, 100 cans of this and that. We're going to beat his ass in the park because we have. Just the fact he did it, he's a dickhead. So we're not even going to feel bad about it. We're also going to do it because we need it. We can't subsist on that.
Yeah, people just, like I said, you learn a lot in these situations. I've seen some really great acts of human kindness during this time. And obviously, we've seen tons of the worst parts of humanity on this. And you just have to decide, hey, what's this going to do for you? I mean, I'm the first one to protect anybody from violence, my friends or my family. On something like that, but I'm also the first one to help out somebody that's just being ignored. Like you said, these older people, these poor older people, they're already scared to death. They've been told that if they even breathe outside air, they're gonna catch COVID and go. I mean, the fear mongering was just horrific on this whole thing. Really and then on top of that, they're trying to navigate a store with all these crazy people around them, just grabbing and just knocking into each other. I mean, when you saw the early days before we had a social distance, but they were clearing out the stores. It was crazy. I was in New York. When it first hit. I did my last live training in Toronto prior to this, and then I flew down to New York to do some media. And I went across to the CVS that I always go to when I'm in New York. I stay at this one hotel called the Art House, which is a cool hotel.
Yep, for that place.
Yeah, it's a cool place. And so I go across to the CVS. Dude, I'd never seen anything like it. It was gutted. It was like not gutted like looted. There was nothing on the shelves.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just crazy. You know, when you saw that and you go, wow, this is the mob mentality. This is what can happen. And that quickly, I just like the supply chains were completely disrupted. And I've got stuff from like look at Rogue. Look at a lot of the fitness companies. They can't get any equipment because all their equipment was made in China, and none of it's getting in the country right now.
Right.
But hey, speaking of which, I know this is more of a tangent, but it is on the same subject.
Cool, it's good.
What do you think about what happened with CrossFit and Glassman and everything? Do you think they're going to be able to recover out of that?
Yeah, I'm just getting up to speed on that. A friend of mine posted about that whole incident, and she gave her thoughts on it. So that was my first exposure to it. And then I saw on Fox or CNN website, I saw the latest how essentially he resigned over some sensitive comments, to say the least, that he made. Here's my take on this, and it's a little bit more complex than most people. Now, do I like what he said? No, I don't like what he said at all. But I also don't like this cancel culture we have right now, where every time someone says something that's offensive to others, we want that person to disappear. We want them excommunicated. Now, I'm not saying that this Glassman guy is a great guy and that let's give him another pass and all that. I'm just saying it's a very dangerous path when every time someone says something that you don't like, we want this person gone. We want this person to not be able to work. They have to resign. They have to get out. They're done. We want them to be finished. So I need to look into it a little bit more. Now, can they recover from it? Yeah, I'm sure they can recover from it. You know, right now it's all over the news and it's not
good. A lot of them are saying we dropped CrossFit. We dropped the name CrossFit from our box and all this other stuff. It's just like, I get it. Everybody's, you know, they're going to knee jerk on a lot of stuff. And listen, I'm not saying it doesn't deserve that. I mean, when you do that, I look at, and listen, not as bad as Bikram, but you know, look what happened to Bikram and his brand when he did it, when he did, you know, with his situation. I don't think it is as egregious as the Bikram situation, but it was pretty bad. I mean, it's really tone deaf.
No doubt.
Stupid. Yeah, and arrogant. And also the initial response was just one of total arrogance. Like, I can't believe, I get it. Like I even look at the Drew Brees situation and other stuff. I can't believe what some people, I can't understand why people are trying to make points right now. It's not the right time to make certain points. You know, like there are certain things are too volatile right now that if you try to shape something in a more inclusive way, you know, people have to understand when it's a pure emotion, there's no nuance. And if you try to bring nuances into an argument, you're going to be seen as either for or against, you know, and if it's the other side and you're seen as against, they're going to vilify you, you know, and destroy you right now. And I'm not saying like people hear this sometimes, they go, well, what are you saying? I just have to cow down and just not say anything? No, pick your time. Pick your time on when to say certain things on this. There are some good points that can be brought up later, but right now you can't. I mean, there's just...
You have to ask yourself, how much time are you willing to allocate towards this?
Yeah.
So if I want to say something controversial on Instagram, fine. But I'm going to get a lot of backlash that I'm going to have to address. Now, am I prepared to allocate hours, days, however long to address that? And what's the upside of me saying whatever it is?
Yeah. There's no benefit.
And if you think of it that way, if you frame it that way, I think you're going to be a lot more cautious with what you say, a lot more deliberate, which is probably a good thing, because the last thing you want to do is just get emotionally driven and go, I'm going to go write about this right now. Boom, you post it right up without even thinking about it. And then you have this big backlash and you're going, oh boy, now I got to deal with this. And these people they're not perceiving me the way I intended. And now you're wasting a lot of time dealing with that.
Well, yeah, and a lot of too is what we do is we jump to conclusions before we have all the information on certain things. Like, you don't need and understand why I'm saying this. The great thing about the George Floyd situation was nobody could say shit about that. Nobody. That was completely easy to say. One of those rare instances where it was just blatant and it was just right in everybody's face. And I was very heartened by the response. I was very heartened by the fact that everybody condemned it. off of the bat for the most part. That was a cool part. The problem is there are other things where, hey, you want to have other discussions and roll out other discussions, that's fine, but make sure you're actually going to have a discussion. If it's just going to be a yelling match and a potentiality to get violent, is it worth it to you? Is it such a party that you really feel like if I don't make this statement, I don't take this stand right now, I'm not going to be able to, see myself as the human I want to be seen. If it's that passionate in you, then hey, by all means, go say it.
Yeah. What's the benefit of what I'm trying to do here?
Yeah.
What am I trying to achieve with whatever the action is? So if I'm putting up a post about Project Child Save, okay, what am I trying to achieve? Okay, I'm trying to build awareness. I'm trying to get people to listen to the interview and maybe ideally make some donations. So that's fine. So I know exactly where I'm going with it. But even something like that, you have to understand the context. I mean, what if I went to some funeral where some parents lost a kid, and right after someone gives a eulogy, I'm going, hey, everyone, I know we're feeling bad about so-and-so here, but I just wanted to let everyone know about this organization. All people are going to be like, why are you bringing that up right now?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right now, most people are not going to be that moronic where they think that's the right context to bring things up. But we see situations like that all the time where sometimes someone's saying something that is an important issue, but they're saying it to a group at a time when you're not going to get the response you want. It's not going to have a positive outcome. So you have to pick your battles essentially and go.
And people aren't going to hear you because they're not open to hearing anything right now. That's the other thing.
Like you said, like if I started saying, "Hey, everyone, I know this virus is bad, but right now what you need to do is take this supplement, eat this," and I put that information out there for my people. Yeah. But I didn't necessarily try to proliferate it mainstream and say, hey, everyone, this is what you need to do.
Well, what I really appreciated about what you put out, Mike, was you put out the complete information for people to read on their own. That was really cool because how many people just sit there and say, oh, just pop this, don't worry about it, this will take care of it. You're like, hey, here's all the research behind it. You guys want to talk about antiviral and all this stuff. Here's the latest that I have on this. And I thought it was really, really well done. And that's, but you've always been that way. You've always been about educating your clients, which is cool. Whereas if you just try to, anything else would smack of trying to take advantage of the situation, type thing. Like, hey, COVID's around, so I just came up with my new antiviral. It's super secret, and here you go. And you saw people selling shitty masks. You saw all sorts of like opportunism during this, which was really, really interesting to watch.
That's the problem we see with some of these posts too, though, going back to the protesting and so forth, is some people, it was more of an obligation. They go, okay, I need to say something about this so that people know where I stand on it, when a lot of people probably don't care where you stand on it. You're just someone on social media that they've never met. Right. Now, I felt the need to share my experiences on racism and my perspective because I felt it was a unique perspective. Now, I'm not African American, but I've been perceived as that. So I've been on the receiving end of that racism before, many times, multiple contexts. So I just wanted, so I can empathize with that. And then I've been on the receiving end of either racial profiling or some kind of profiling by police officers. So I've had some negative experiences, and then I've also had some really positive experiences. So I just wanted to share my perspective, but what I didn't do was just go, here's everything that's ever happened to me, and just go one story after another another. Where now this whole article is about me. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't about me. I just wanted to put it out there so that people want to engage in discussion, I'm happy to do that. Because the racism I see in society now, there's definitely systemic racism and there's blatant racism, but there's also very subtle racism. And I think people have to start thinking about racism that they carry, that they don't realize they have, or at least prejudicial thoughts. I mean, there's a lady at the dog park one time who said, 2 black ladies are in their car smoking weed while their kids are on the playground. Now, the first thing I heard, I thought, this is a white lady. The first thing I thought of when I heard the statement is, why was it important that you let us know that they were 2 black women? Why didn't you just say women? Because if they were white women, I guarantee you she wouldn't have said 2 white women are in their car.
Yeah.
She said 2 black women, as if we shouldn't be surprised because only black women would do that.
Right.
So this is a level of racism that's in her unconscious mind. Now, I don't necessarily think she's a racist person. This is someone that she's a likable person. I like her. But she has these thoughts in her mind that she's not aware of, and she needs to be thinking about that. It's like, why did I say that? Why am I thinking about that? Same person, in another context, I was describing a guy who works at Nevada SPCA, my friend Dwayne down there. And he's a black guy, but I'm not someone who just says, oh, yeah, the black guy working down there.
Right.
So I describe him. I'm like, yeah, I used to be a model. He's a good looking guy. He's about 6'2". And she's sitting there going, oh, yeah, the black guy. So that's the first thing she thought of. So here's where I'm going. When she sees him, the first thing she thinks of is there's a black man. And then everything else may start coming into the picture. Now, when she sees him as a black man, she's going to apply all of her preconceptions about what she thinks black men are now applied to this guy, and then maybe she goes from there. So that's a level of either mild racism or at least some prejudices on her part that she's not aware of. Another time, there were a bunch of bad black people having a barbecue at one of the parks in Seven Hills, Sonata. That was about 20 people. Now I pull up with my dogs and I have to walk through this group, which I'm perfectly comfortable doing. I'm not intimidated by really any ethnicity. I've been around all kinds of ethnicities my entire life. So if I go to a house party and it's all black people there, that doesn't bother me one bit. In fact, in a lot of ways, I see that as a positive because it's probably going to be more fun.
Yeah.
That's my bias, just based on experience. But anyway, this was a very friendly group. As I walked through, people were like, hey, how you doing? So-and-so. Hey, you want to eat some stuff here? They're very nice people. And then I get down to the other end of the park, and there's some regulars over there who are like, oh, yeah, it looks like a rough crowd over there. I was like, based on what? And I just said it like that. I go, based on what? Because I wanted them to say it. I go, I want you to say it. I want you to say it because a group of black people are congregating there. And then if there's one black guy walking around the neighborhood, no big thing. But if 5 black guys are walking around the neighborhood, someone's probably going to call the police, or someone's going to be looking out their window going, oh, look like some rough people over there. So there's a lot of prejudicial thoughts that people harbor that they're not even aware of. They're like, I'm not racist at all. And then they just said something really racist. Now, you may not be racist categorically, but you might have some tendencies towards that you're not aware of. And we all have these things. I catch myself, not racism, but I catch myself making judgmental thoughts sometimes when I see someone. I'll look at someone, I'm like, oh yeah, this person looks like this. Then I go, well, then I'll catch myself, I'll check myself and saying, I don't know this person, I don't know anything about them.
What's really interesting is when I was doing my research for When Violence is the Answer, and I was up at some of the penitentiaries, I read a book was recommended to me, and I read this book, and a guy had done a big study he was actually a UK researcher. He did a big study on the US penitentiaries. And one of the things in the chapter that really struck me was he said, everybody talks about prison gangs like they're just inherently racially based. Right. And he goes, it is true they are racially based, but not for the reasons that you think they are. He said, when humans get together, if you put any group of humans together that are unfamiliar with each other, they come in. The first thing we rely on is our visual. And the easiest way to visually identify is like and like. Right. And he says, normally what people do is they all go in their own groups, and then there's interaction within the groups. But the first thing that happens is they get there just out of safety, just out of like, okay, I don't know anything. Okay, these guys look like me. Those guys look like them. And they all go. And then there's the interactions that start and happen after that. He goes, it's just a basic human thing. Now, he wasn't saying there weren't components of racism, but he was saying the way we are predisposed to do things as far as humans from years of survival is like goes to like first. And then once we're all safe in our groups, then we'll step out a little bit to interact with each other. Because what people don't know is like the Mexican Mafia and the Aryan Brotherhood work together all the time. They sell drugs together. They do a thing. Black Guerrilla Family works with a lot of Latino gangs and stuff like that. If you put them all together, you'd say, oh, no, that would never happen. But they actually all interact with each other on there. So when you take it out of that petri dish of asocial violence that are in the penitentiaries, and then you go back out into here, people don't want to admit that they default that way. They'll default first this way, and then they'll see a group of people that aren't like them, meaning they physically look different than them, and they're going to think like, I don't have my group with me. I'm exposed. And Christ, I mean, when I think about it, all my black friends over the years, they had to put up with feeling that way for most of the events that we went to. It's rare that I've gone to a couple of events like you talked about where I was minority, in a situation, and people have always been cool to me. But yeah, you sit there and go, I remember in the thought back of my mind, I go, oh man, I wonder if they're going to accept me. That was a thought process. I was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
shit.
And that's
I
a
hope
natural
I hope
process.
they'll like me, and it was just stupid. But if you're not familiar, the first I remember being it was I went to Lincoln High School to a party at Lincoln's big African American high school in Vegas, where Marcus Allen went to,
Okay.
where
Yeah.
I played against his brother Damon
Oh,
when he was
really?
in there. But so I went to one of their parties one time, and I was probably one of 3 white kids at the whole party, and it was awesome. We had the best time ever. Like I said, the music was way better than what we had, and people were really cool, and we had a great time, and it was there, and that's what kind of broke it for me. And then the cool thing is, and I tell people this all the time, it's a shame that we don't have more national service, and I don't mean just military,
I know what you mean.
because the cool thing about national service is you work with everybody, man. You don't have a chance. You're all in the same boat, and you all have to work together, and it's all about who gets the job done type thing. I mean, that's a really cool thing, because you are forced to interact with each other. You don't have these choices. You can't segregate off or do anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's healthy, because I met guys from different cultures and backgrounds and economic situations. Like, I met these farm boys from frickin' the middle of the country who were just great people. Like, I always thought, kind of, farm guys kind of hickish and blah, blah, blah. But no, they have a whole other set of knowledge that I had no idea, when it came on. And then I get kids from like urban parts of the cities and stuff where I didn't grow up. I grew up mostly in a neighborhood family. So I got all this exposure by being in an organization where we all had to interact with each other. And I don't think there's enough of that. Unfortunately, I think between social media and the proliferation, like even like a Netflix now and stuff, we don't all watch the same stuff. One thing that was interesting was back when there weren't as many selections, we all pretty much got to watch, pretty much the same shows and a lot of the same news and stuff like that. So we all came in. Now we're so partisan that we all go in our little areas and we don't interact with each other on a regular basis. We can actually live a life where we can curate our news feeds so that we only see stuff that we agree with,
That's right.
and that we can only people that we like, and only people who write the way we think they should write. We don't I deliberately go on my news feed and find people who are contrary to a lot of the things that I think of, because it's way more thought provoking to do that. But we don't. People now just, it's easy for people to never get a contrary opinion on anything if they want to live their life that way,
Yeah.
and that's dangerous.
It is really dangerous. And a couple funny stories. I mean, thinking about what you said about how in prison, initially at least, you're most comfortable with your ethnicity. So that's what you know. So those are the groups you gravitate towards. Now, growing up, I'm half Indian. My mother's from India. My dad's white. But I don't look like an Indian, or at least a stereotypical one. So if I walk into a room full of Indians, they're not gonna be welcoming necessarily. I'm not saying
Right.
that. I'm not saying this. They're not going to be welcoming as if they're perceiving me as an Indian man walking in there. They may be welcoming just being cool people, which most people are cool people, but they're not. I'm not going to experience that. So while I've experienced a variety of different things, I've been around white people who think I'm white, so they are comfortable expressing their racism in front of me, and that's
Right.
very compelling. I'm like, wow, I can't believe that person just said that.
Isn't that amazing?
I was at the blackjack table one time, and this guy next to me said something, and I was trying to concentrate, so I didn't really pay attention. But I thought about it later. I was like, man, I can't believe that guy said that in front of me. And then I've been around black people who think I'm black, so I get their perspective as well. And then I've been around racist white people who think I'm black, and they come at me with racist language and so forth. So I understand all of these things, and as a young man, it was very confusing because I'm not being perceived as what my actual ethnicity is.
Right.
So I have a different perspective in the sense that if I were in prison, I don't know what group I would go towards.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what group would be accepting necessarily. It's not going to be the Aryan Brotherhood, even though I'm half white, because I'm not really white. I'm not African American, so it may not be that group either. I'm not Latino, so I don't know. Fortunately, hopefully I'm never in that situation and have to find out.
What's interesting though is this is when I like to blow people's minds away. What's his name? Bigham, Trevor Bigham, I think is the guy's name. He's one of the founding members of the Aryan Brotherhood. He's half Jewish. Really? He has a Star of David on one arm, and he has a swastika on the other. And that's that's what they're trying to say. When I went more in depth and actually looked, They say, oh yeah, everybody thinks that all prison gangs are about racism. He goes, it's not. It's about making money. He goes, that's really what it's all about. Is we don't want to get anything in the way of making money. Like people think it's like chaotic and like violence happens just spare of the moment. No, everything's freaking authorized, because if you say I go in there, I'm not associated with anybody, and some guy pisses me off, and I get in a fight with him in the yard, and I take him out, and then they lock down the place. Well, guess what? They're going to come for me, because I just screwed up everybody's business because I had some beef with a guy, and I didn't get it cleared from anybody because I'm a knucklehead and I didn't know I had to. And that's that kind of stuff. So that's what's really interesting when I studied that, when you kind of see where it goes. And that's why it's so funny when people say stuff like defund the police or defund a police force, because they obviously don't understand what happens when there's a vacuum like that and what fills the vacuum.
Right.
And what fills the vacuum is far worse than whatever they're dealing with. I would much rather tell people, hey, let's reform the police. Let's reform these areas that we're having problems, and let's really get in some, strict hiring guidelines. And let's also make sure there's enough training protocols in there to weed out these idiots, that make it through once in a while. Because you don't want the alternative. You don't want some self-serving militia, basically, that comes in and takes over. I don't know if you saw that movie, like The End of the World. It's so funny. It's like Seth Rogen and those guys.
Oh,
and
yeah, I've seen that. That was a couple years back.
Yeah, and that's what happens, man. That this is it. And what's his name? Danny, what's his name, ends up being the Uber god who took over, because he's just the most violent, horrible person. And that's normally what happens, is you have warlords that end up, rising up and running things. And sometimes they'll do nice things, but then, you're dealing with a warlord, and that's just it. So we have to ask the tough questions, and right now it's too emotional for us to ask the tough questions to look at any of this right now.
Even saying just get rid of the police, that's a very binary statement too, because like you said, that's not going to solve anything, because something has to fill the void, which would most likely be exponentially worse in the short run and certainly in the long run. And whatever reservations people have with the police departments, no matter how valid they are, many of the arguments are valid.
Absolutely.
There is at least a system of checks and balances and some kind of regulatory control there. Now, does that need to be improved? Sure, but at least there's something in place, so it's not completely chaotic. So I think it comes off more dramatic to say we need to eradicate this. That's the problem.
Right.
But imagine, this is not the greatest analogy, but it just came to my head, so I'm going to go with it. Imagine if all the refs in the UFC were really bad. So people said, you know what, we need to just get rid of all the refs. The fighters know what they're doing. They're not going to cheat. They're going to work it out among themselves. We don't need a ref to be in there.
No.
Can you imagine what a UFC would be like if there was no ref in there?
Dude, it'd be mayhem.
Right. It'd be people grabbing the fence. It'd be people kneeing on the head.
Sure.
All those rules and regulations that were put in place, guess who enforces those? The ref does. The ref is there to make sure that the fighters abide by those rules. And if
the ref merely being there, will stop them from doing something like that, because they know, that it'll get exposed.
Imagine the story of these stores used to have not a poster, but one of those cutouts of a police officer on different aisles, because from a distance, it looks like there's a police officer over there.
Yeah.
And they found that there was less theft just as a result of that, or something to the equivalent of a mannequin dressed as a police officer, something like that.
It's like when they leave an unmarked car, or they leave an unattended police car on the freeway facing towards the traffic, and people think, and there's no cop in there, but people see the car from far away and think, oh my God, he's got a speed gun, and so it slows everybody down, so people aren't speeding. So you're absolutely right. There are things there, but. What's funny is it's like we have to decide as a country, are we going to continue? Because the easiest way to tear the country apart is to collect everybody in their own little groups, and everybody has their own little fiefdoms that are in there, and now we're not united anymore. Whereas collectively we had a chance right after Minneapolis to come together collectively and say, we're not putting up with this shit anymore. This is it. We're all about this, and unfortunately it went partisan again, and it went in there was a day and a half, I would say, where everybody was outraged, and there was no conflict at all. Everybody's there. And then it all started on both sides. And there were some dumb statements made on both sides. And then it's just got progressively worse, you know? So I don't have an answer. I wish I had an answer. I wish I had a solution. My only solution for people, because the only thing, in situations like this, we can only focus on what we can control. And really all we can control as human beings is our response to everything. And so I would just counsel everybody, really, really think about what your response is going to be. Really think about, really think beyond the initial. Think about, hey, I really want to go do X, or I want to post X, or I want to say this. And then the question that you asked yourself is the question people need to ask themselves. What is my goal in doing this? What is my outcome? What am I looking for? Why am I compelled to do this? Is it pure ego? Is it virtual signaling? Do I just want to be part of the group and do these things? Or do I have a real sincere, statement that I will make, fully knowing I'm exposing myself to potentiality for backlash or potentially even violence? And that's cool. That's noble. If you're willing to say, hey, I absolutely understand by making this statement, there's a good chance, I'm going to have repercussions. There's going to be repercussions to that. That's totally fine, as long as you've thought it out. Too many people are just going off of pure emotion and they're not thinking, and they're just blurting stuff out, or they're doing things, and then they find themselves in just really bad situations,
On a more superficial level, I've had customer service issues where I overreacted. And I'm much better at this now than I have. But in the past, a customer came at me in a very rude, irate way where I felt the need to defend myself and be right, instead of going, okay, what's the problem here? What's the fastest way to solve the problem here? And then respond in a way where you're unemotional, just very tactical and logical, going, hey, sorry to hear about this issue. Here's what I can do to make it right.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, then you just give it. I mean, maybe giving a refund is making it right, or something. In other words, you focus on the solution rather than, hey, don't talk to me like this. I'm not going to tolerate this crap from you. Blah 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 blah. And then you waste your time going in this back and forth, and you're just adding fuel to that flame. So now I'm much better at going, okay, this is a customer service issue. This is what the customer is not happy about. Now, what can I do? What's the fastest thing I can do to make this situation right? Because that's what's going to solve this. Because most likely the person who's angry, if you come up with a viable solution, 90% of the time they're going to be cool with that, especially if you're polite and how you respond and all that. But if you come up with a solution, but you feel the need to make a smart ass comment or to retaliate in some kind of way, that's not going to work well for you. That's going to things. You may like, oh, I got that person, but you didn't win anything. You just wasted a lot of time.
There's a guy in my industry, and I love him. He's a good dude and stuff. But oh my God, he gets involved in every little Twitter spat he can get into, any perceived slight, anything like that. I'm like, dude, if somebody writes something negative to me, I think you and I talked about this years ago. The best response for me is, hey, thanks so much for taking the time to write. Blah blah blah. You actually had some good points or something, but you say sufficiently vague in it. You don't actually point out anything they've talked about. You just talk in general. Hey, thank you for doing this. Boom. Hey, I'm gonna look into this, and then you let it sit. And they normally come back at you as like, oh shit, I'm dealing with a human. Right. And they normally come back, hey, sorry, I was irate. I go, totally understand. You didn't get what you thought you needed. How can we make it better? And then you go there. I found that approach, even though you have to literally tamp down every urge for that perfect smart ass response that you so want to say and just go off. But I've disciplined myself to do that, because most people, like I said, Mike, if it was face to face, they would never approach you like that. Like, they had to physically bring the product in and talk to you and say, hey, I didn't get what I wanted or anything like that. They would do it in a really, much more civil way. They say, hey, I was really disappointed. This came in. This supposed to happen? Then you look at it, go, oh no, that's not supposed to happen at all. We'll take care of you here. And that's a good, pleasant exchange. But the assumption is right away, I don't know what it is about virtual sales. There's something about virtual sales where people just think they can say whatever the hell they want. They can just attack you. They can just make the most ridiculous statements. Like you deliberately want to screw them over. And you're like, dude, I've been in business for how many years? And the last thing I want to do, I want my customers, I stand behind my products. I want to make sure you get it. And if my product isn't for you, I'm going to get you your refund, because I don't, I'm not interested in having customers that, aren't satisfied with my products. I mean, that's the whole idea.
Right.
But again, it's basic civility, that's really lacking.
And sometimes there are times where you have to tell a customer to get lost. You don't have to use profane language. You just refund them and goodbye. Because this whole notion the customer is always right, that's not true. A lot of times the customer is not right. Sometimes the customer just wants to be a jerk, and it's not worth dealing with that person in business. So the fastest way to solve it is you give them their money back, so there's no issue for them to take it further, and then you just move on. You go, that's it. You know what? Didn't work out. Here's your money back. Best of luck to you.
If they come at me, I'm fine. I'll deal with it the way you and I just talked about.
Yeah.
You go after my customer service girls. I've got two amazing women and they handle everything for me, and they are the sweetest people in the world. And you should see how they handle irate customers. But you go after one, I'll get rid of you right away. Right. I'll refund you. I'll give you in there, and I'll block it. And for them, and I'll tell them, I go, you are not. I go, listen, you're dealing with enough stuff right now. You don't need these irate, crazy customers. I'm not paying you enough for this.
That's
and
right.
So. And they really appreciate it when you stand up for them that way. But luckily, that's the rare. That's the rare.
It's rare. It's really rare. Most of my customers are great people. They're nice people. I get a lot of positive feedback from people and referrals and so forth. It's really rare. It's like a couple times a year you deal with someone. Sometimes not even that many. It's just maybe one time a year or two times a year. It's not that often. So that's the key. The good thing about email is you don't have to respond right away either. So sometimes I read an email and I go, you know what? Don't respond right now because you're pissed off. You're about to go work out. So now you're pissed off that you think you have to deal with this right before you work out. Go work out, then come back. Or wait until tomorrow, assuming it's not or something urgent where you feel like you have to get back in a few minutes. Because chances are you're going to be much more composed. And the good thing about email is even if you start off writing something overly defensive and hostile, you can dial it back. You can reread it and be like, okay, maybe I shouldn't say that. Let me get to the point. Like I said, I always try to be very unemotional when I respond to someone and who's angry, and just go, sorry to hear about this. You just apologize right away, whether it's no matter who's at fault. Sorry to hear about this issue. Sorry to hear you're dealing with this hassle. And here's what I can do to make it right. And if that's not acceptable, then I can give you a refund and we can go our separate ways, something to that effect. And majority of the time, that's more than enough. Because like you said, people want to know that. I think the most important thing is people want to know that you actually care about this issue.
And they were heard.
They're buying a product from you and they don't know really anything about you. They've never heard of you, and maybe some friend recommended or something, and then something's not going right. Well, either it's not being delivered on time or it's not working the way they thought it would, whatever it is. And just the fact that you're taking the time to say, okay, here's what I think is going on. Here's what I think will help you out. Here's where I think we can move forward in a positive way. Most of the time, that's what people want. They're frustrated, so they're going, just tell me what to do. And sometimes they just verbalize it in a way that you don't like. So you tend to want to retaliate first.
Yeah, and that's where you got to resist that urge.
Anywhere. Yeah, like you said, like part of you like, ugh, man, I just want to take this to this person in this way. But it may be satisfying for about a second. Maybe you tell one of your friends, hey, guess what I did today? But the 99% of the time, it's going to escalate and make a lot of problems for your business. That's the person who's going to go write a 1,000-word Yelp review, talking about which they wouldn't have done before if you made things right. But they're pissed off. So like, you know what? I'm going to really hurt this guy's business. I'm going to go write this review. Now you got to go respond to the review. You got to respond responses to the review. And now you're really wasting a lot of time.
I remember years ago, there's a guy on the old Dragon Door forum, and he bought some of my products, and he just tried to go off on me on training. He's a former Marine, older guy. Super codger guy. And he went off on me, and I was pissed, because I was like, it was unfair criticism, and he was dead wrong. But I sat there and I said, I've taken some time before I did my response. I said, I've just consulted Dr. Phil, and I've watched 3 new episodes of Oprah, and I said, and I'm willing to forgive you now, and I'm willing to sit there and go. And I used a bunch of touchy-feely stuff because this guy was like a hardcore dude.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
He came back at me. He said, that was the funniest thing I've ever read. And he goes, obviously you got a great sense of humor. He goes, I apologize for the way I came at you. Here's my real concerns. And then we had a civil thing. But I got to tell you, Mike, it took every ounce not to just go off on this guy, because he was trying to bait me, and he got me. But I said, okay, what's my goal here? You know, what I want? Do I really want to ostracize this guy, or do I want to just sit there and answer it? And I said, okay, I'll give him a chance. I'll use a little humor and see how he responds to it. And sure enough, and then the main thing is, like I said, two things. People want to know that they've been heard, and then they also want to make sure that they're not marginalized. And when you give them that, for the most part, unless they're just truly just an agitator and just an asshole, then you're fine, at that point. And then if they continue to be that way, you have no compunction to get rid of them, as a customer, because there are just some jerks that are out there,
Yeah. And every business deals with that. And I've seen people handle bad Yelp reviews really well, where a manager goes on there and they respond, they defend themselves and their employees, whatever the situation is, but they do it in a classy way. So it just makes the person that put up the initial negative review look bad. And that's the best thing. Like, your response just makes the other person look bad. Not even that may not even have been your intention, but that's the way it comes off. Now the other person looks like they're overreacting, but it diffuses the situation. It's the most important thing. And I think no matter what you do, I mean, one of the things about violence is I wasn't comfortable with violence at all growing up. I didn't deal with it a lot. So I felt the need as a young man to be able to handle myself in physical confrontations. So I took a job as a bouncer at the only nightclub in the small town I went to in Worcester, Ohio. And this place wasn't like Roadhouse, but it wasn't that far from it. It was pretty chaotic. And I remember the first time a fight broke out, and I was like, wow, it's my job to break that up. And my heart rate went through the roof, and I'm doing the best I can with whatever limited skill set I had. But over time, and I worked there many years. I worked there the last 2 years of my college tenure. And it got to the point where not only was I comfortable in that environment, but I could anticipate things before they happened. And that's the skill set I have now. I've been to concerts before where I can feel some turmoil in a certain area. I go, these three guys look like they're going to be trouble once the music starts. So I recommend we all go over here. And sure enough, those three guys are trouble. So you can feel it. There's an energy, it's a vibe. And I only have that instinct because of that job. Even though it was a long time ago, it was basically like, look, if I go to a karate class, and this is pre-mixed martial arts, so you're going to go to karate or you're going to go to kung fu. And I mean, the best case would be you go to a boxing gym or a wrestling gym. That would have been the most useful, but that wasn't the advice that was given necessarily at that time. Like, you want to learn how to defend yourself, you need to go take a karate.
Got to go karate.
Something like that. Now, my reservations about all that were, I go, this is a controlled setting where there's a lot of rules in place. You can do this, I can do this. You can't do this, I can do this. I go, okay. What about when I'm in a situation of a real fight where there aren't any rules? When a fight broke out at this nightclub, it's not as if people said, okay, you can punch me in the face, but don't punch me in the sternum, or don't knee me in the stomach. It was chaos. These people really wanted to hurt each other, so they did whatever they could with whatever their skill set was. The higher the skill set, the worse the damage. The lower the skill set, it was still potentially damaging. But it was the same end game. It was chaotic. And that was basically a trial by fire. You're learning how to defuse these situations on the job. It's not like I took a training course before I went in there. They just saw someone like me. They're like, hey, you look like you have some size on you. You work out, so we'll go ahead and hire you. It's not like they put me through a training regimen for 3 weeks and then I was able to do it. You're learning on the job. But I also saw, I was always really good at defusing situations, meaning that two people are about to get into an interaction and I would just separate them and I would talk to each group. And I was usually able to find common ground where I would say, look, you guys just stay this far apart from each other. You stay over here, and then you guys are both fine. If I even see you going near each other, you're both out. And that worked a lot of the times. But some of the guys I worked with, they wanted to get into fights. So when a fight broke out, they saw an opportunity of, I get to fight someone and get away with it. So I'm going to punch this guy in the face. I'm going to knee him in the stomach. I'm going to throw him up against the wall with 3 times more power than is necessary. And I'm not going to just throw him out the front door. I'm going to throw him out the front door so hard that he goes flying across the street, lands in the pavement, and so forth. But my attitude about that was, not only is it unnecessary, but what about retaliation?
Exactly.
Some people are not going to just let that fly. Some people are going to be like, man, this guy effed me up. I'm going to go get my friends, and we're going to wait for him to leave on his own at 3 a.m, most likely unarmed, and we're going to attack him, and he's never going to see it coming. Where if you just defused it the way I did, there still may be someone who wants to retaliate, but most likely not, because you didn't really give them anything to warrant that, where they feel that they have to get back at you in a very aggressive manner to reclaim their manhood.
Well, I got buddies that obviously bounced at some of the finer gentlemen's clubs here in Las Vegas. Not that you and I know anything about those, but what was really interesting was one of the best techniques that they would use. I remember the guys at Paradise did this for years. You'd go in there and every one of the bouncers shook your hand on the way in.
They're always super nice at those places.
And what's really interesting about that is that human connection. Like all of a sudden, now that you've literally shook the hand of the guy who basically has to make sure things stay safe. And so when he approaches you on the floor, if there's something going on, it's a guy that you just shook his hand. And so it was amazing how much that diffused just a lot of the initial resistance that they'd get from seeing a bouncer come in and stuff. And it was just something simple. It's just that whole idea of making a connection coming in. Now, listen, against a dedicated jerk or asshole or somebody who's just looking for trouble, obviously that's not going to work. But you can fend off all the people who just probably would have allowed themselves to be triggered by making that small little connection, coming in. And it's stuff like that, like with us, meeting anger with either a little bit of humor or a little bit of, hey, I'm really sorry that you took it that way. Here it is. Even though you'd be justified in telling the guy to go screw himself, because of the way they approached it. It's just asking yourself, what outcome do I want? Do I want to have to worry about coming out at 3 a.m. and looking around my shoulders to see who's going to attack me at my car because I was a jerk to this one guy? Do I want to live that life? And you just have to, you have to think about where you're going. You have to think about what do you want ultimately in this. And not enough people do that deliberate thinking, And one thing that's interesting about COVID too, I mean, during this lockdown was I got to review a lot of things. I got to review a lot of my principles, my methods, and my outlooks on things. And I got to actually, clarify a lot of things. There were some things that I said, hey, you know what? That's not really accurate anymore. I'm not going to be saying it that way anymore. I've been able to actually, because I think what happens is we get into a way of thinking and then we stop analyzing it. We stop looking and say, hey, is that the best way for me to actually, communicate in this subject or do this or do that, So I'm hopeful that once the emotion climbs down, that we'll take a look at this as a society and say, you know what, we're better than this. We don't want to be this way. How can we literally get rid of these idiot politicians, get rid of these people, and how can we as society engage with each other and not have to get to this point, not to have people manipulate our feelings and our thoughts, and we're not going to let social media just, whip us into these frenzies.
Right.
I'm really hoping people will be more thoughtful about, the dangers of social media and the dangers of groupthink, basically.
Oh yeah.
Because we're seeing horrible examples of that right now.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I keep trying because I'm looking at you right here. I'm like, hey, like we're talking, and it's got to be annoying. Sorry.
No, it's cool. It's cool. I wasn't sure what you were looking at up there at first, so it's
just me with my dumb camera. I'm just not.
Hey man, it was awesome. This is a great discussion. I'm glad we did.
Thanks so much for inviting me, man. This is a great surprise, and we've been hoping to hook up anyways, and obviously I think now we can actually go have lunch somewhere.
Yeah, let's definitely do that soon.
Yeah, but hey, thanks so much, man, and best of luck with this format. I think it's a great format for you.
Yeah, it's just another way to add some content. I haven't done anything with YouTube in a long time, so I just wanted to put some audio-visual content. And I really enjoyed the podcast with Sincere and what we do there, our format. But one thing I like about this is we're actually looking at each other. So it's not as perfect as an in-person discussion would be. But a lot of times when you're just audio, it's easy to get distracted by things. Sometimes you start looking at your phone while someone's talking, or you get up and move around.
Natural, man.
Here, though, you have to stay engaged the entire time. And that I like that. I like it a lot.
Yeah. No, this is cool, man. Well, listen, you just keep doing what you're doing, my friend, and we will stay in touch. And listen, if anything comes up, if I learn of anything, along what we've talked about, or if any questions come out of this from clients on the YouTube stream, just let me know. I'd be more than happy to answer questions. But But you know, if I have anything that's relevant that I think you'd want to know, I'll definitely reach out to you.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know what's going on, man.
People can go to tftgroup.com. That's your website.
Yep.
And then I'll put your Instagram handle in the notes and so forth, so people can go check you out in there. I'm also going to take some 1-minute clips from this conversation, and I'll post those and tag you on Instagram. Perfect. Just people can get a little feel for it, add it to the story, and so forth. But this
I'll throw it up on all my stuff too, because my people will love this. This will be great. It was a great conversation, my friend.
Perfect, man. Well, thanks a lot. Hope you have a great evening, and let's connect in person soon.
You got it, my friend. All the best.
Take care.